pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty. Can we have a motion to accept tonight's agenda, please?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. So, Dr. Harrison, if you want to start us off, please.
Good evening, everyone, and it is great to see the trustees this evening and the community members joining us from home. At this time, we're actually going to stop to recognize some of our wonderful scholars, those students that have been recognized as 2021 National Merit Scholarship Program semi-finalists. So at this time, Mr. Strumwasser, we would need to promote Henry and Nicholas and Ms. GM. So I believe Mrs. Demarest. Juliet's not able to get in. Demarest and Pompano. And just bear with us as we're looking to promote all the right people. Juliet's there, promote the families. We're waiting on Zoom right now, folks, so bear with us. So Ms. GM, you're in. If you could please turn on your camera and your mic so we could see you, please.
I was trying to download that background. Now I don't know how to change it. Like, I don't know what to do. This is how I look.
I love it. Henry and Nick, that is just for you, the new look of your fabulous school principal. I wish I could fix it, but I'm not on your end, Ms. GM.
Just go with it.
Go with it. It's the spirit of it, where the boys are going to remember this forever.
Should I take 1 minute to try to fix it? Or
If you feel more comfortable, you could turn off your camera and we'll just hear your lovely voice, and so we can take time to honor these tremendous scholars.
okay, I'll leave this this image. That's fine. Try to figure it out later. Well, thank you so much. Mr. Samuelson and I are both very proud of all of our students at IHS. And tonight we are here to recognize two outstanding students, Henry Demarest and Nicholas Papapanou. Both Henry and Nick have been named semi-finalists in the 2021 National Merit Scholarship Program. Henry and Nick entered the academic competition as juniors along with more than 1.5 million students by taking the 2019 PSAT, which serves as an initial screen for all entrants. Nick and Henry represent the top 1% of students from across the nation. According to its website, the National Merit Scholarship Program honors students who show exceptional academic ability and potential for success in rigorous college studies. To become a finalist, students must submit a detailed scholarship application, demonstrate an outstanding academic record and leadership abilities, write an essay, and be endorsed by a high school official, all of which both Henry and Nick have done. About 90% of semi-finalists will advance to the next round, and about half of the finalists will win a National Merit Scholarship. National Merit Scholarship finalists will be announced in February, and scholarship winners will be announced in the spring when they plan to award approximately 7,600 scholarships worth more than $30 million. Again, Nick and Henry, we are so incredibly proud of both of you. We thank your families, your friends for loving and supporting you. We are also thankful to all of our teachers and our broader community for inspiring and supporting you over the years. So thank you, Henry. Thank you, Nick, for doing your best, and you should both be really proud of yourselves. Thank you.
So Henry and Nick, at this point, normally you would come up and we'd get to shake your hand and give you a nice round of applause. So you're getting that virtual high five right now. So we're really proud of you guys. If you want to unmute yourself and say a word or two, you certainly have the floor, so feel free.
I'd like to just say thank you very much. So great honor. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and same here. Thank you so much for all of this.
Great. Well, thank you, boys. Congratulations. And as Ms. GM said, we're all most proud of you. So congratulations, and thank you for taking the time to join us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, and on behalf of the board, well done. This is always parts of the meetings that we enjoy when we get to celebrate the successes of the students in the district. So well done, both of you, and good luck as you advance in the competition. Back to you, Dr. Harrison, for your updates.
So, good evening once again. Tonight's meeting is filled with some important topics that we are going to discuss here as a leadership team, and seek opportunities for some feedback from our community members. We are going to talk about athletics and our athletic philosophy this evening. We're going to provide a brief update of the work that we're looking at in the possible expansion of the AM/PM model at Dow's Lane. But those are going to be, certainly don't want to say too much as we're going to get to that down the road. A few things that I do want to highlight. First, about tonight's agenda. Over the last couple meetings, we've had the opportunity to acknowledge a couple amazing staff members that have retired or are planning on retiring from the Irvington School District. And tonight we have a couple others. And with such a full agenda and knowing that we have a number of community members joining us tonight, I certainly want to acknowledge them now. So I would like to take a second to just acknowledge Laura Lane, Laura Warriger, and Joanne Caraprice, who are all going to be retiring at the end of this school year. And I want to thank them, obviously, for their years of dedication and service to the Irvington School District, and know that we are going to find some opportunity to make sure we celebrate their wonderful careers and their commitment to the students of Irvington. Also, tonight is the last Board of Education meeting for Pauline Davies, who is our district clerk and registrar. And Pauline is moving on to another challenge in her career. So Pauline, we want to thank you for your support and dedication and great work over your time here in Irvington, and certainly wish you nothing but the best as you move forward. So thank you, Pauline. And then finally, I just want to talk about COVID in general. As we're going to be digging into some items related to student experiences and teaching and learning tonight, it may have been alarming to receive communications from me in regular occurrences in the last couple days, where we've had a couple close calls with respect to COVID in our schools. Fortunately, this is an example of where our cohorting does work and works well, where we've had a couple students and students at the middle school and at the high school most recently that have tested positive because of their data last attendance in school, coupled with when they were considered to be positive or contagious by CDC and Department of Health standards. It did not have a greater impact on school operations. So we're hopeful that those members of our school community are feeling well and feeling well soon. But it's just a good example of why the model that we have in place does work and serve us well, because it was able to insulate us from some degree of closures or broader quarantining that may have been possible at that point in time. But with the frequency of those cases and certainly the growing numbers that we see across the state and across Westchester, we know that we're going to see more of it, know that we're probably going to have some other impacts. But at this time, it really is the place for us to be mindful of all that we do inside and outside of school. All the studies that are being performed across the United States and some that are being done in New York, most recently in New York City, and is looking at the positive cases of COVID and the spread. And the vast majority of those cases has demonstrated that the spread is occurring outside of school and not in our school buildings. Reason being, when you're in school, there's strict protocols in place, there's masking in place, social distancing is being monitored, and hand washing is being enforced. So what that leaves us to think about is what we're all doing outside of school. So this is a message to our students. This is a message to our students' parents that we need you to do your part. We need you to make sure that you are social distancing outside of school. This is not time for sleepover parties. This is not time for pizza parties and not wearing masks. We have to do our part, as difficult as it may be, to make sure that we are adhering to those requirements that we have in school and really being safe outside of school. So I ask that community members please continue to partner with us and make sure that our students are being kept safe, that you're following and enforcing those important protocols in your respective households. Also, just around the corner is Thanksgiving. And with that in mind, I want to give some reminders similar to those that have been in my weekly newsletters for the past 2 or 3 weeks, that we are encouraging and I'm asking for you to stay locally over the Thanksgiving holidays. As much as we all want to travel or gather with our friends and family, this is a time where there's great concern about spread. So please, let's be considerate of everyone else. Let's try to be responsible during this difficult time. Let's not travel if you can avoid travel. If you do travel, understand that New York State has revised their travel restrictions. And if you travel to just about any state in the country, if you travel internationally, you're going to have to either quarantine for 14 days upon return, or you have to participate in a testing protocol. So in that testing protocol, let's say you were to travel to Texas, for example, you would need to have a test done in Texas 3 days before you leave that demonstrates that you're negative. And then upon return to New York, you would need to immediately quarantine. And on the 4th day, have a test administered that would come back negative. Again, these would need to be molecular PCR tests, and that would need to be negative. So with 2 negative tests, one in the state that you traveled from, and then one here in New York, you will be able to return to work, be able to return to school. Otherwise, short of that or with any failed test, you're going to have to quarantine for 14 days. So I ask for your consideration. I ask for your support. We need to keep our schools open. We need to keep our community members well and safe. We can only do that with the community's partnership. If there's any questions that you have about the quarantine protocols, the testing protocols, please visit our website. All the resources are posted there. They're also linked from my weekly newsletters. So I just ask for your support and consideration for the health and well-being of everyone in the Irvington school community. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Harrison. So now we have our committee reports, and I'll start with B and G. Ms. Stein will obviously correct whatever I get wrong or supplement. So at this point, we have permits for all of the phase 1 work, and we have the bids prepared and have, actually those have been sent out, correct? The bids?
Bids are out.
Yeah,
right
and
now.
so bids are out now for phase 1. We expect them back, okay, there we go, Thursday, so there'll be the bid opening.
No,
And
the in December. I'm sorry, December 2nd.
okay, that's,
There's a walkthrough on
Okay.
Thursday.
I knew
okay.
there was something big happening Thursday.
Let's walk through, and then I thought it was early December, so there we go. So
Yeah.
early December, the bids will come back. Once we have the bid opening, B&G will review the bids along with our professional partners to then come back to the board to update the board on where the bids came in and what the B&G's recommendations are regarding the bids and which we'd want to accept or not. And then at that time, also, hopefully we'll have a little more of an idea on phase 2 and where we are in that portion of the project. Our professional partners are still working on phase 2 and trying to take the designs and refine them so we can get some better cost estimates on phase 2, so we can have a more global discussion about the entire project once we get the bids back. So I would expect hopefully by either mid-December or very beginning in the new year, we'll have a return presentation from B&G to the full board in terms of where we're at. So Ms. Stein, anything else to add?
No, that's it. We have several contractors who've already picked up the package, so we're hopeful we'll get a strong pool of candidates for hopefully a favorable bid. That's what we're hoping on.
Perfect. Would someone like to speak to the communications?
I can speak on that. So we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago on the 21st, and we reviewed the updates to our website where we tried to assist with facilitating navigation to COVID health related resources versus all the information just about reopening. So if you visit our webpage now, you'll see, and Chris, you'll know the terminology better than me. I can't remember what we called it, but these like buttons, which I don't think is the appropriate language, that you can click on so that you can actually get information just about related to health and COVID, as opposed to all the reopening plans that we've submitted to New York State and that other information. We'll also be updating the frequently asked questions page on the website just to make sure that everything's aligning, since the updates come in fast and furious. So it is hard to keep on top of that. And we discussed just how our the communication around the recognition of the staff and faculty and anyone and all of our consultants and everyone that came on board to help with reopening, and just the great job that they did this year, that they're doing this year. Did I leave anything out, Beth or more?
I just clarify that if you visit any of the home pages, so either the district or each school's respective homepage, if you look in the center of the website is going to be a photo that rotates, and then on the right-hand side there is a scroll with images. There we have really separated out information that pertains directly to health-related resources associated with COVID-19. So if you click on that, it'll take you to that targeted portion of our reopening page. And then there is, as Aaron was indicating, a button on the webpage for the reopening resources specific to that. So we separated that out. And I want to thank Mary Ellis for her assistance and leadership, and with the Q&A doc, which has been updated within the past 2 weeks, and will continue to do so as we move forward.
Thank you. Would someone like to update on curriculum?
But I think we actually reported on the meeting of the 14th.
Okay.
We had a meeting that was scheduled for today that has been rescheduled for next Tuesday.
Thank you. Yeah. Policy.
Okay, so on policy, we're continuing through our review of the 5,000 series. We're working on in our most recent meeting, and I'm sure Superintendent Harrison can chime in on this, we're reviewing and updating our policies on co-curricular and extracurricular programs, including eligibility for those on the part of students. Also, we've been looking at student organizations and those requirements, student expression, and I believe in our next meeting, we're moving on to student fundraising.
Thank you. Beth, do you want to continue and talk about CAB?
That's fine, sure. So at today's CAB meeting, we were introduced to the two new co-chairs, Chris Raymond and Joe Archino, who have taken over from Tanya Hunt and Allison Felix. And we are moving forward to creating, with student participation, a video that will create a community message before the holiday season. In addition, all students are invited to join the Youth Task Force for Westchester, which is a program where students from other schools can meet each other on Zoom the first Tuesday of every month. This includes students from Westchester and Putnam, and the goal and the mission is to promote positive health messaging on various social media platforms. In addition, I'm sure that people in the community have been receiving communications about our November 16th presentation on vaping, how parents can identify vaping behavior by their children and what they can do to prevent and educate their children about that. And again, that will be Monday, November 16th from 7 to 8:30 p.m. and will be available on Zoom as well.
Thank you. Jane, anything to forward on either safety or wellness? Okay, Dr. Harrison was there.
Carol, would you like to present on safety and wellness sustainability?
Sure. We met, I think it was a week or two ago now. We talked a lot about, first of all, just review the district safety plan and make sure that everyone knew that had been updated along with the building plans. The district safety plan is on our website, has been since July. And the building safety plans are not public documents. They're living documents that the school safety teams, the emergency response teams use. We have hired, as you know from our budget process last spring, additional support on safety with Alteris, and our consultant, Jeff Hunter, who's now a little bit more assigned to Irvington and assists us, really has been he kind of spoke quite a bit about some of the different things he's doing and for the district. And he spoke about how he's working with the building teams to really start to breathe life into our safety plans. And so like last year, we worked on threat assessment. This year, we're going to be working on reunification and some of the other things that are in the plan. We also had to add quite a bit to our building safety plans this year in terms of various annexes that the state required, including like some of the things for continuity of operations, continuity of instruction, pandemic, so all kinds of different things. And there were like probably 10 other annexes that we added this year. So Jeff is really keeping us on top of all that. He's been supervising our security guards and giving them training that has been much needed. All kinds of things that I wish I'd had time to get to more often. So it's really been a wonderful thing for the district to have his presence. And we spent most of the meeting just talking about that and the goals of this year. So it was a very positive meeting.
Thank you. Does anyone have anything else to report from any of their liaison assignments?
That's it. I joined the IEF meeting for a period of time on last Wednesday, I believe it was. And they're certainly, like many other organizations, sorting through their strategies for fundraising right now. And they also were busy approving many grants that are coming our way, which we're very excited to participate in. So we thank the IEF for that. And then finally, we had the Strategic Partnership Council meeting recently. The Strategic Partnership is the representative of leadership bodies of the school district, the Board of Education, Booster Club, PTSA, and the Education Foundation. We meet 3 times a year just to discuss local initiatives and to ensure that our work is aligned with one another's and consistent with our district vision and our strategic objectives. We focused on reopening, logistics around reopening, health and safety and instruction. And then all the partner organizations really engaged in some dialogue related to just the efforts that they're going to undergo in fundraising and some of the initiatives that they are supporting in the school district. So for example, you'll see our fine athletic director in a little bit, Mr. Bonamano, who is wearing a wonderful face mask that the Booster Club donated to all of our student athletes. And then tonight, for example, there's 4 grants from the IEF that are on the agenda. So despite the difficult times, each of our partner organizations are really deeply engaged in support of everything that's happening.
Thank you, Dr. Harrison. So now we have our first community comment period. If there's anyone who'd like to make a comment, you can put your name and address in the chat feature of Zoom. There will be an opportunity for comment after the presentations as well. While you're certainly welcome to comment now, I always think it's actually helpful for people to hear the presentation and then comment. And just remember that if you do comment now, you may not have the opportunity to comment in the second comment period, depending on timing. So with that, I'll pause for a minute to see if there's anyone who wants to make a comment, and if not, we will move on. So not seeing anyone, and since we have a second opportunity, I guess I will turn over to Mr. Bonamano, our new Director of Physical Education, Health, and Athletics, for our first presentation this evening.
So Brian, actually, I'll start by wanting to officially welcome John to his first public meeting. John has been a tremendous asset to our school community. With our athletic and PE and health department having been led well by Artie McCormick for many years, and then last year very capably led by our interim Stu Hansen. John comes on board with a fresh set of ideas, some incredible experiences as an athlete, having been a Division I athlete himself, having been a teacher, having other professional life experiences, having been an athletic director in another school district in the area. John has brought an incredible amount of enthusiasm, knowledge, and expertise, and has collaborated so well. And his induction to the district has been so successful, I think, because of who John is, the way he thinks, and how he's reached out to folks to forge partnerships. So we welcome you, John, and thrilled to have you here on the Irvington team.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here. I appreciate all the good words you just said about me, and honestly, my success is the success of everyone in this room. The support that I've had from each one of you, from Dr. Harrison, from all of my colleagues, coaches, and the student athletes have made this transition as seamless as possible in this environment. So I thank all of you for your support during this time.
So when we think of the transition, you think about a time for anyone to start a new job, to come into a district with all these crazy dynamics around us, and having to launch an athletic program for the first time ever in this environment. And John has done a great job. He's developed a tremendous athletics reopening plan, which is also posted on the district website. So John, you've done a great job. And I think as a show of that level of support and partnership, we have so many of our staff members that have joined the meeting tonight, administrative colleagues that are here to lend their support to John, and then later to Andrea and Liza as we talk about the Dow's Lane work in a little bit, but it's just a testament to who you are and who we are as a school community. So that said, this evening we're going to talk a little bit about the athletics program. John's going to give an overview of the philosophy of the program and our particular offerings. But then there's a couple open questions and things that we have grappled with a little bit as a school community in recent years. And during John's short time here, we've talked a bit about these topics. So John's going to walk us through, and we're going to have a first level of conversation. And I want to remind everybody of that. It's a first level of conversation, first time we're bringing this forward. And it's likely that we're going to have follow-up conversations that are going to happen. Some may occur in this form, and others may occur in some other formats along the way. So that said, John, I'm going to get ready here to share my screen. So now, John, the floor is yours.
All right, well, thank you again for having me this evening. I just want to start by saying, as with any organization, its philosophy directs its practices, impacts its culture, and ultimately serves as a foundation for success. As part of my early transition into the district, I look to conversations I've had with my colleagues and department handbook to gain a deeper understanding of Irvington's philosophies and practices. This evening's presentation is an opportunity for all of us to reevaluate our current philosophy, practices, and participation trends that impact our athletes and athletic programs, while posing a few questions that will assist in facilitating a discussion and inform potential next steps regarding any future enhancements and/or considerations. This is a crucial step in leading our athletes, coaches, and programs to continued growth and success. When we speak of successful outcomes, we typically consider the results on the scoreboard. And although there are tremendous value in striving for such outcomes, I would argue that it's how we get there is of greater importance and directly impacts the successful results we all seek on the scoreboard. Athletics innately provides our student athletes with opportunities to enhance key character attributes that ultimately lead to successful individuals. This is achieved by including athletics as part of an integral part of the student's overall education and by promoting and ensuring the value of education and fair play. As athletes continue their journey through our programs, student athletes are able to cultivate and instill essential character skills and qualities of leadership, player development, collaboration, and cooperation. I would like to reiterate, our aim is to build competitive and successful teams. However, this is made possible through focusing on programs grounded in education-based athletics, whose purpose is to promote positive student behaviors and relationships while enhancing character skills like sportsmanship, teamwork, healthy competition, all of which are meaningful life lessons. I ask that as we move through this presentation, you keep in mind the previous and following slides and consider how these questions impact our overall philosophy and culture. The questions that I ask that you keep in mind are: what level of student participation in modified sports should the Irvington Union Free School District support? Should the Irvington Union Free School District consider or reconsider the athletic placement process? And to what extent should the Irvington Union Free School District contemplate expansion of its teams? Each level of competition, varsity, JV, and modified, have philosophies that mirror the department's overarching philosophies. However, there are developmentally appropriate progressions that occur at each level. The following slides articulate these progressions and are found in our handbook. Now, varsity sports is the highest level of interscholastic athletics. Our philosophy here at Irvington is in line with most philosophies I've been exposed through my playing time, my coaching career, and now as an administrator. Varsity philosophy, typically, the best players make the team regardless of their grade level. Coaches select as many athletes as practical for their teams in a manner in which they can manage the teams appropriately. Playing time and sometimes practice time may be disproportionate given the competitive nature of varsity athletics. Varsity athletes are expected to demonstrate a high level of skill and commitment, and they should be prepared for a 6-day-a-week commitment throughout the season. Practices and competitions may be scheduled over the holiday, vacation periods, and on rare occurrences or occasions on Sundays. The varsity coach is considered to be the leader of the program, and is responsible for the communication and connection with the junior varsity and modified programs. Our JV programs place a strong emphasis on physical conditioning, refinement of fundamental skills, elements, strategies, and commitment to team play. Achieving a balance between continued team and player development while striving for victory. This is very important, the balance of the continuing the team's development as well as the player's development. Student athletes are expected to demonstrate a high level of dedication and commitment. This is not a recreational program, just as varsity is, and it is a more competitive environment and requires more commitment. This junior varsity philosophy also entails a 6-day-a-week commitment throughout the season. Our modified programs look to provide an opportunity to learn new skills and test them in competition. And there's a lot of debate surrounding cut versus no cut policies. Myself, I'm not a huge fan of the word cut. I consider to say, calling it capped because of the connotations that the cutting has. It doesn't sit well, and it could have a psychological impact on children. But we have to consider the two different versions of the policy and how it impacts playing time and the level of competitiveness, the increased demands on the facilities and the budgets. When I think about programs that, foster no-cut policies, bloated rosters have an impact on the reduction of playing time of individuals, the ability to provide appropriate, meaningful instruction, and may adversely affect individual growth as well as other programs' growth. And this was seen in my former district, where I had a volleyball program that housed over 30 children. And in the same season, our field hockey program barely had 9. And when we capped the roster so that, you think about volleyball, there's 6 children on the court at once. To have over 30 kids, there's a lot of wait time for many of the children. So when we capped the roster for the volleyball program, we provided an opportunity for kids to try out a new, sport. And that is the purpose of modified sports. It's to provide opportunities for kids in an area that they might not have had experience with before. And by capping that volleyball roster, we were able to preserve our field hockey roster because students who no longer played volleyball went to field hockey and were able to complete an entire season. And you think about the ramifications of that, it's pretty important because if your modified programs, can't field enough players, they're not going to exist. And eventually that's going to creep its way up the line to the varsity level. So I think that's something that we have to keep in mind, but at the same time, have an understanding and provide opportunities for kids in other areas, whether it's a different sport, whether it's a team manager, whether if it's a team photographer, if someone does not make a team, to keep them involved with the sport and help them socially and emotionally stay connected to those sports. Ultimately, we look to balance playing time when you talk about modified sports with the integrity of the game and the level of competitiveness. And through this, I would talk about certain circumstances where if you have a student athlete who is, a superior athlete at that level, those individuals would probably compete against the other schools that have a higher level of athlete. And then you could kind of dovetail that with student athletes who might not be as skilled yet and are still learning and give them playing time against, and opportunities against teams that might be in that same caliber so that everyone has a positive experience. I don't think any student athlete likes to go out and kind of be exposed as far as their ability levels. So I think it's very important to kind of balance the playing time when appropriate and match them appropriately with their competition so that they have a positive experience. In certain circumstances, 7th and 8th grade students may be considered for playing up. Now, playing up, middle school athletes must qualify for high school athletic programs after a screening process to determine their physical maturity, fitness, and skill levels. This is called the athletic placement process. So, as I mentioned, the athletic placement process is a program for evaluating students who want to participate in sports at a higher and in some cases a lower level that best meets that individual's needs and abilities. Typically, you see middle school students wanting to test up. Very rarely do you see high school students who want to test down. It is part of the regulation and is allowed in certain circumstances. But again, it needs to be appropriate for their level of competition. During this process, to initiate it, you have to have parent or guardian approval, which we're started to do through our family ID registration system. Without that approval, I cannot begin any of the evaluations. So it's very important that parents understand that during that time. I recently sent out a message through Mr. Sotile in the middle school for our potential middle school athletes who might want to test up for the winter sports, giving them a time frame to register so that we have enough time to get through the entire process and allow them the opportunity to start sports if they were to make it through that system and try out for the team at the start of the season. Once they've completed that aspect of it, there's a medical evaluation. This is determined physical maturity and is reviewed by our district medical director using Tanner scale ratings provided by the private medical providers. So our district medical director will look at the physicals from everyone's primary care physician and determine whether that student athlete is at the physical maturity level that would be comparable with the athletes that they would compete against. From there, the coach's evaluation is a skill evaluation form that's completed by coaches, basically explaining what level they believe that child is at based off their previous experiences. And in some circumstances, they might not have any previous experience with the child. And at that time, they'll talk to other coaches, maybe at the modified or JV levels, to find out where that child might be. If at that point in time, there's still not enough information, we can rely on our physical education teachers to talk about the student athletes' athletic abilities. In that evaluation form, if student athletes are not going to participate at least 50% of the time, the testing would stop because it wouldn't be worth that child's experience sitting on the bench and watching, as opposed to having game time experience within the modified setting. The next portion of the testing is the physical fitness testing. This is a physical fitness test administered by a certified physical education teacher who is not the coach of that sport in which that student is trying out for. In a testing like this, you're going to see they're going to test their cardiorespiratory endurance, their muscular strength, their muscular endurance, and their flexibility. Now, the testing has changed over time. It used to be called selection classification, which you had to pass all 5 tests. If you failed one of them, your test was over and you aren't able to move on and try out for a team. The state has reassessed it and modified it in a way that now the testing is very similar, but you're able to fail one of the tests and still be able to try out for a program. So you need to pass 4 out of the 5 fitness tests. Once you've completed that round of evaluations, that's where the student athlete would then be approved to try out for a team. They still need to try out. Just because you pass the APP does not entitle them to a position on the team. The coaches need to evaluate them firsthand at that point. And if they were not to make the team, they would have an opportunity to go back to the modified level and play. So our district policy speaks specifically to our athletic placement process and has certain restrictions in relation to students moving up. And in my experience, this is one of the best policies that I've seen, from my playing time to my coaching time and now as an administrator. I think that it truly puts the athlete at the center of this and considers their overall well-being. And the policy states that no middle school student athletes are allowed to participate on a high school team if the rosters are at capacity or if a high school athlete is cut because of a capped roster. So it does prioritize the high school athlete over a middle school athlete, regardless of their athletic ability. Student athletes at the middle school will continue to have experiences in the high school once they get to that level, if that is the case. And one thing I always tell parents and players, if they do not pass the APP, is that they should not worry about that. It's not going to have a bearing on them being able to play at the next level. From my own personal experience, I did not even have an opportunity to play up as a student athlete when I was in high school It didn't exist. And I'm going to be quite frank, even though I was, fortunate to play a Division I sport and recruited as a Division I athlete, I personally, I know myself, I probably had no business playing up at that point in time. I think I might have been exposed and probably had a bad experience to the point where I might not have played anymore. So you really have to take that into consideration when a parent gives approval, as if their child would be able to not only be, gifted enough to play up, but from the social emotional standpoint, that they're ready and they are at that caliber where they would be able to handle possible, negative experiences, in the sense that they might not have the same success they would have had at their own level. And I think that's very important to consider. The policy also states that 7th grade students will only be allowed to select and classify up to the varsity level in non-contact sports that do not offer a JV program. So if there's a JV program, they would have to stop at that level. If there is no JV program and it was a non-contact sport, that 7th grader would be able to test all the way up. 7th grade students may only classify up to the JV level in contact sports. So even if their abilities and their testing show that they could play up at the varsity level, our district limits it so that they're not jumping too fast. And I think that's extremely important in the safety, the overall safety of the student athlete. Again, very rarely, the APP process, the athletic placement process, is meant for exceptional athletes. And when you think about the conversations that are had at the high school level between students and what middle school students would be exposed to, there's a difference there. So it's very important that even if, the child in their own mind wants to play all the way up, there's a lot of exposure there that we would just want people to be mindful of. 8th grade students may select and classify up to either the JV or varsity level upon meeting all the state and district criteria. So they have that opportunity to test up to any level. When we start to think about the capped rosters and what that might look like, I think it's important to focus on our participation data. Right now we have 23 varsity programs, 12 JV programs, and 17 modified programs. As you can see, I have a 3-year breakdown of our participation numbers. And if you notice in the fall, in each of the seasons, we've actually started to increase our participation numbers, which is wonderful. That means kids are getting involved in our athletic programs here. But if you take a look at this year, you're going to see that there's 195 was our numbers as far as our registration, but that did exclude our varsity swim program, varsity JV volleyball programs, and varsity football, as well as all of our modified numbers. So what I did was I took the participation numbers from last year in those same sports and added them to this to see where, kind of ballpark where we would be if we had those programs at this point in time. And as you can see, we're still starting to tick up as far as our participation numbers. The link underneath the sport-specific breakdown, that is a hyperlink that you'd be able to access a breakdown of each one of the individual sports and see what the participation numbers are by sport. So if you take a look at our fall sports offerings, you could see what we have for our varsity, junior varsity, and modified teams. We have about 20 offerings in the fall, quite a robust amount of offerings for our student athletes. And I'd like to reiterate, in the event that our policy remains the same and we have rosters that are capped, there are multiple opportunities for student athletes to still participate. Our winter sports, you can see here, again, we have a variety of different offerings due to facility constraints. I think that it's still quite a robust offering for our student athletes. And our spring sports offerings are also, again, quite robust. As these tables demonstrate, Irvington's programs, we're hosting 20 programs in the fall, 14 in the winter, and 18 in the spring. This provides a lot to choose from for interested athletes and provides various coaching opportunities for qualified staff members and out-of-district coaches. Which brings us to the recruiting and retaining of quality coaches. Anyone who's involved with athletics would understand that there's growing challenges in recruiting and retaining quality coaches. There's a variety of different reasons for that. From experience, we're always looking to try to hire individuals with the most experience that would be able to provide their knowledge to our student athletes. Finding coaches that philosophy aligns with the philosophy of the district. Not every coach feels the same. There's many coaches that still follow a very old school approach. And then there's coaches that might follow, a more social emotional kind of mindset as far as how they handle their student athletes. And I think it's very important that we understand that, the old school way of doing things, although might have had value for us as children growing up, it's a very different time. And children, are treated differently than they have been in the past. And it's important that we meet those needs in a way that would be productive for our student athletes. Availability. When you think about what time practices typically are, very few individuals have the opportunity to do that. In my former career, after I stopped playing in college and I was in marketing and advertising working in the city, I never had an opportunity to get out of working time to be able to coach as much as I wanted to. I wouldn't get out of work until 9, 10, 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning at times. So it was very difficult for me, even though it was a passion of mine. It wasn't until I made the transition into teaching that I was able to do that. And for many people, I think it kind of falls, true to many people because they don't have that opportunity if their schedules don't allow. And then certifications are another piece of it. Just to get initial certifications, it costs coaches about $500 just to start out with coaching. And when we look at how much it's going to cost for them to fully get their complement of certifications, we could be talking about, in excess of $750, close to $1,000 by the time they're done with all their trainings. So that could be another reason why it would be difficult to hire people, because that's quite an investment for individuals that, with the amount of time that they dedicate, isn't, a whole lot of money. They're doing it more for the passion and love of the sport and wanting to share that with their student athletes. When we recruit coaches, OLAS is kind of a default system that we go to, that online application system that education uses here in New York State to find certified coaches. But I've also looked at local clubs. I always call college coaches to find out if they have recent graduates, and training facilities, the House of Sports, places like that, that have individuals who have stayed, on top of the coaching philosophy and the way that things are nowadays to try to impact kids in a very positive light. So I'll reach out to all of those places to try to find the best possible candidate. Competitive pay definitely has an impact on that. Making sure that we're in line, at least in line with the districts surrounding us. Because as you know, if you could do the same job in a different location and it has very similar characteristics, money talks, and people will end up going in that direction to try to maximize, their own interest. I think offsetting certification expenses is another great way that we could look to do that. And I know here within the district, we have it worked out where, at least with our CPR and first aid courses, we have someone here in-house, Luann Ricciardi, that does a lot of work with CPR training and helps us out tremendously in doing that. And I think that is a huge asset to have within a district to be able to get them certified at no cost to them. Other professional development opportunities that we could provide coaches would be wonderful as well. I know many coaches who are always looking to increase and get better at their craft, not for themselves, but for the benefit of the students. So anytime we have the opportunity to develop or provide professional development opportunities, that's great. And supportive policies. Finding, the best coach for a sport is the best thing that we could ever do. And I'm not just talking about skill related, knowledge, but being able to connect with student athletes. I was very fortunate to work with a coach last year in my former district who has now come to our side here in Irvington, which is wonderful, who not only had tremendous successful playing experience at both the collegiate level, Division I, and professionally, but I would completely put that aside for the manner in which he handles student athletes and how he maximizes what they have to offer. And I think that having supportive policies that, address that you're going to hire the best possible candidates for the position is key in that. So when we talk about our sports programs, there are some facilities and budgetary restrictions. And I know that, we want to be able to provide as many opportunities for our student athletes as possible. But there are constraints at times, and we have to consider that. And that's typically when we talk about capping rosters, because you can add programs here and there, and we'll get to that in a minute, but you're going to have facility and budgetary restrictions that might limit being able to offer too much. And it could potentially water down things. But if you look here, you could see from our district and community / village facilities and their respective use, you could see how often we're using things, whether it's in district properties or outside the district. So for our fall sports, you could see that, our cross country, our field hockey, both varsity and JV, football, and soccer programs are utilizing our turf field here in the Ali track. East Field has housed, our field hockey and soccer programs here in the fall, as well as Upper Dalles. Lower Dalles typically would host the varsity and modified football programs for practices. And the campus gym would typically be used for our varsity and JV volleyball, as well as the modified program at the Mar Gym. We do utilize the Memorial Field and Memorial Courts and EF International Academy's pool for, our other needs for modified programs, as well as some of the other tennis programs and things that we have here within the district. Same with our winter sports. You could take a look quickly at what we have, as far as allotment of places to be able to house our programs. As you can see, our varsity boys swim, varsity bowling, and varsity hockey are outside the district, again, which has budgetary implications. And then our spring sports. And you can see that, again, the fall and the spring, with the amount of programs that we have, our fields are well utilized, as well as our village facilities. And the village has been absolutely wonderful to work with and very accommodating to our programs. So those cost drivers that are associated with new additions of teams. So when we make decisions regarding our programs, there are multiple factors that need to be considered. It's not always as easy as just saying, well, let's add another team. As you can see, these listed items have budgetary and facility implications and are necessary considerations during the decision-making process. We have to consider coaching stipends if we're going to be adding programs. We're going to have to talk about purchase of new uniforms, increased transportation costs, use of our facilities and outside facilities, officials, equipment, additional chaperones, custodial support, and at the varsity level, sectional fees. Now, I just want to kind of just pivot for a second and just talk a little bit about, the impacts that COVID-19 had today and moving forward. So for all of our programs, our top priority is, and this is typical, but even more so now, is to provide the safest possible re-entry to interscholastic athletics for our student athletes, coaches, support staff, and spectators. We did this by following standards and guidelines provided by the CDC, the New York State Department of Health, and local health departments, as well as the New York State Education Department. We also coordinated the best practices established by the New York State Public High School Athletic Association and the Section 1 COVID-19 Task Force. We're continuously operating in consultation with our district medical director to ensure that the proper measures are being considered with respect to our school community. Our goals that we developed for our plan are as follows. We established precautions based on those CDC, Department of Health, New York State Ed, again, local health department guidance to help prevent against the spread of COVID-19. We did this namely through signage, markings on our bleachers, proper hygiene and respiratory etiquette, use of face coverings. As you can see, I'm wearing the face covering that was donated by our booster club. Each one of our student athletes had the opportunity to have these. They wear them every day during their games. And, personally, I would like to thank them for that, because not only did it provide our student athletes with, the protection that we would want for our kids as far as their face coverings, but also in a branded manner, we look very professional when we were out on the field, as opposed to many of the other districts. So I wanted to thank them for that. We also developed pods for our student athletes. So there were times where during our practices, we didn't have the entire team together at once. We had them broken apart in pods of about, a maximum of 10 athletes, and we kind of spread them out throughout the field for the majority of the practice to limit any type of exposure. Again, towards the tail end of practices, we would have to converge to be able to do certain, strategy type of sessions. That was very important for the success of the team. But we kept that into consideration, and going through all of these protocols, this was not something that was done by just me. It was myself, our district medical director, our school nurses. Hannah Gross was a huge piece in this puzzle, and helping us achieve what I believe we achieved and this year. We've been able to make it through almost this entire season, which has been wonderful, and our kids have been safe. We also prepare every single day by having daily pre-practice game wellness checks. So every single student athlete is screened and temperature checked prior to every single practice and before they leave for any game, before they hop on a bus or before they enter the field for each competition. This is another added avenue for us to try to protect our student athletes. We look to educate all of the involved parties on our protocols: coaches, players, officials, and spectators. And this is important so that there was an understanding of where we were in relation to, or what we needed to do in order to accomplish what we've been able to accomplish this far. And as Dr. Harrison said, we rely heavily on our student athletes and their parents to make wise choices so that we can make it through our seasons. We also considered, how we could safely reintroduce our student athletes into physical activity. And this included training modifications. We talked about the pods. We called it, the 80-20 rule, as famously dubbed by Hannah Gross, where 80% of our practice was more about those individual skill development things where we could keep kids separated for a large period of time during their practices. And then that 20% at the end, we could bring everyone together. And our coaches have done a phenomenal job with that. We also talked about gradual activity progressions. So we're talking about the FIT principles, frequency, intensity, time, and type of workouts, because many of their student athletes, especially this fall, had sat by idle for a very long time during this pandemic. And it was very important that we introduced them in the proper way, so it wasn't just get back out there just like we normally did and put kids at risk. We also talked about the safe return of interscholastic competitions. And we do that by confirming with opposing districts of their screenings prior to their arrival. There were limitations imposed by our section in reference to how many spectators per student athlete could show up to our games. Every single night before competition, we would email out gate list registration, and parents would go in and register themselves and another spectator for their student athlete. And our chaperones did a wonderful job managing that and making sure that we provide the safest possible playing environment as possible, and try to promote a very positive atmosphere for our spectators. And then we talked about one of our last goals, that provide social emotional support for our student athletes. Our campus psychologist and social worker, Noreen Sabia, Juliana Calapai, and Julie Austin were instrumental in working and empowering our coaches to identify and address social emotional needs of our athletes. Although they had the opportunity to get out there, there was a long period of time where they were isolated from their friends and from their activities. So it was very important for our coaches to be able to identify, having that direct line with the student athlete to make sure that they were in a good place. So that occurred during our preseason meetings. When we talk about, soliciting feedback regardless, regarding all of the previously mentioned topics, it's essential in identifying areas of growth and success. It will assist us in directing future programmatic decisions. And a recent survey was established and distributed to current student athletes, coaches, and parents of our athletic programs to provide a broad baseline of information for us to consider regarding our stakeholders' alignment to our current philosophy. Again, this was to provide us with that current stakeholder perspectives pertaining to the concepts found in our handbook and our beliefs. And supplying this relative feedback, may elicit future considerations that enhance our athletic programs. Early results of the survey demonstrate that our stakeholders are in pretty much agreement regarding our philosophy. And with the 3 key questions posed to start this, presentation, I started to see a little bit of a divergence of personal beliefs. And I think that's why it was important that we pose those 3 questions to you as a board as well, as representatives of the community. So this will bring me back to our key questions for consideration and their potential impact on our athletic programs. So for our discussion purposes, I would like to ask you here in the room and the community to provide input on, what level of student participation, should the Irvington Union Free School District support in regards to our modified programs.
Thanks. John, thanks for leading us through the presentation so far. And I know you have these questions here, but I'm actually going to hijack it a little bit, as is, I guess, my prerogative, because also I think, there's a couple other questions I know that community members have asked at different times and that we've discussed as a board, and not so much questions that you need to have the answer for now, but that I want to plant the seed for and go back to, we don't have to go back to, but one of the slides you had talking about the recruiting of coaches. And I know in particular at the modified level, we've had challenges getting coaches who were familiar or as skilled in some of the sports. And, would love to, have you give some thought, holistically to our coaching recruitment process and what, if any, additional resources from from the district would be needed to try to get coaches who are, maybe more familiar with some of the sports. Obviously, we're thrilled that we have teachers step forward to agree to coach sports where they may not have familiarity, but to try to, build that capacity in the district. So obviously not a question maybe to answer now, but to give some thought to if we needed to either reallocate or change how we use resources to try to improve, the experience. I do think that's one of the things that I know community members have spoken to us about. So I think that would be also, I guess, a 4th question or 4th, area, to think about.
I would like to just make a comment about that, because I think what we did this summer started that process in respect to being able to hire coaches for the entire year, as opposed to waiting right before the start of a season to make sure that we secure coaches. That provides some security to individuals ahead of time and allows us to find individuals not at the last minute. So I just want to thank, Dr. Harrison for his advocacy with it and your support in allowing that to happen. I do believe that is the first step in providing that.
And I think just to bring some clarity to that, John, in John's early days here, he had come forward and proposed the concept of, rather than posting coaching vacancies season by season, posting all the vacancies before the fall season even begins. And then you can actively recruit and make a commitment to a vacancy or a new coach for a winter sport or spring sport. So as you progress through the year, those other folks that may be on the market looking for a coaching gig may sign up with somebody else. So John's effort was to strike early and to try to recruit folks. So, John had already referenced, a coach that we've hired, our boys basketball coach. We had a vacancy And John recruited him. We interviewed. We went through our committee process all in the summer months and hired Mr. Boykin to be on board already, to be able to not be committed to the district, but to be able to start to integrate himself within the school community and connect with student athletes in our high school. So I think that was a big transition. And not only was it John's thinking, but coming together was looking at a change in practice and some stipended positions that are governed by the IFA contract. And the IFA was supportive in this as well. So, you know, John's idea, IFA's partnership, and that initiative landed us in a spot where I think we'll be better positioned moving forward.
Thank you. That's a helpful overview of some of the work that was done leading up into the seasons. So, I mean, I guess going back to the first question you posed on, lower participation in modified sports, I obviously want to give everyone else a chance to speak. But I mean, I think this is an area where there's, real tension in the community in terms of capped sports versus uncapped sports. And I think you did a nice job highlighting both the pros and cons of both in terms of wanting to encourage participation in skill development, but also some of the realities of the resources we have in terms of both the amount of field court space and the number of coaches. And, so I want to hear, others' thoughts, but also, want to hear your thoughts in terms of, at the end of the day, what do you think is the right approach given all of those competing concerns?
So for me, I think there's a balance. I think there's a healthy balance. And I think it's very important. One, student athletes and parents, our district, we all have a voice in making determinations in relation to what was best for our athletic community as a whole. I often joked, in my former district, there was conversations around a turf field and people were asking me my direct opinion. And of course, personally, I would love to have a turf field because it helps with a lot of logistical things, but no one's going to put a $3-4 million field in because I want one. It's going to be because of what the community, the athletic community wanted in partnership with the district. And I think it's the same concept here. I see positives and drawbacks on both sides of it. But I think it's important for us to have further discussion, again, at a later date, whether we form a committee to have a conversation around that, because I think there are very valid points on both sides. I've received, a few messages from, some community members in relation to, the adverse effect it could have on individuals. And I empathize with that. I totally understand as a former athlete, when you do not make a team, there's a sense of rejection and a sense of isolation. And it's very difficult to manage. And, some people may be better equipped to handle situations like that than others. And I think it's important that regardless of the way that we go, we try to provide opportunities for kids, even if it isn't exactly what they're looking for as far as maybe being a member of a team, but keep them engaged somehow within the program, whether it's a different program or, as I mentioned before, you have the opportunity for student athletes or, students who don't make a team be a part of it by being a team manager, being a practice player where you just get to work on, skills and stuff, and not necessarily you're going to be a person that's going to play or potentially travel. But not everyone has access, right? And not everyone has access to travel programs and club teams and stuff like that. So I could understand, from the one perspective where, we want to try to house as many individuals as possible. But at the same time, on the flip side of that, you have to be very careful because you're more serious athletes when the numbers get too large and those rosters get bloated. There's going to be frustration on the other side of it, where student athletes are going to be like, why am I wasting my time here? I'm getting 4 minutes of play time and I want to play in college one day. I'm not going to get there like this. So what are they going to do? They're going to leave your program. And when they leave your program at that age, more than likely they're not going to be coming back. And then it's going to have ramifications moving up the ladder. So again, I think it's an opportunity for us to have a deeper, kind of dive into a conversation with various stakeholders on both sides.
Yeah, I think you definitely highlighted, I think, a lot of the concerns there. I'll say just from, my perspective and fellow trustees can weigh in. I think what is key is for us to get to the point where we've articulated our philosophy and then have consistency, for a period of time between what modified sports will look like, what JV looks like, what varsity looks like, because, I've heard enough stories and, don't want to obviously talk about personal experience, but just, seeing year to year between, coaching switches and having different philosophies. So I think, making sure that we are consistent, across our levels, I think is important so that everyone knows where we're going to be. So if we're going to carry 35 kids on a soccer team and designate kids as practice players next year, we should the next year switch back and only have 20 and make it a cap roster and say tell 10 kids they can't participate. So I think it's important that as we make these decisions, we think about not just what it will be like for this coming season, but how that's going to play out for the next 2, 3, 4 seasons, so that a 7th grader who who makes a team as a practice player, let's say as part of a 30-person soccer team, knows coming into 8th grade that there'll be a similar roster opportunity for them.
Absolutely.
I know I've spoken a bunch, so if there's anyone else who wanted to jump in and continue the conversation.
I don't know what order you're going in.
I'm going to go to Dave next.
Okay. Let's keep it on mute, just green on this. Right?
Yes.
Okay. I always get the combination messed up. So I am going to personalize it for a moment and just tell you a quick story. When I was in high school, I tried out we had this thing called Sing. It was a big thing in Queens. It was a huge production. Each grade put on a show as a big competition, and I tried out for one of the lead roles because I really loved acting and participating in drama. And can't sing, can't dance, can't do any of that stuff. Didn't get the part. Got parlayed into the script writing piece. I was like, oh, this is interesting also. And I formed lifelong friends and wrote the script for 3 straight years and loved writing and turned into an English major in college, et cetera, et cetera. So the point being that I didn't get what I really wanted at the beginning and it led me to something else is a little bit of an analogy to how I don't know where I sit, to be honest with you. I sit on both sides of the fence with this kind of conversation, which is why what you said is bringing in lots of stakeholders to explore the concept, because I don't know that everybody should be playing. I don't know whose responsibility it is to tell a kid that they shouldn't necessarily play in this particular sport, they should try something else. I don't know where we live in that world. I know there's the conversation of not everybody should be getting a trophy, that whole kind of piece. And I straddle the fence. So I do think there's a real space for a healthy conversation. Because on the flip side, right, you talked about all the pieces where if a kid feels that sense of rejection, but is it the responsibility of a coach and a team to manage that, or is that a parental responsibility to manage that in their own family? I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is there. So I agree that it's a very healthy conversation to have, and I look forward to having it on an ongoing basis with members of the community, with your staff, et cetera. The second piece that I want to talk about is space, right? You brought up the really nice consolidated list of space, and thank you for that. And I know that if people are watching and paying attention, that's a list that people would love to see somewhere on a wall, right? Like what fields are there, what are they being used for, and so forth. But it makes me think about, I think about the space dictates a lot of things, right? It dictates when you can have certain sports, where you can have them, how many people you can have on a team. For example, tennis, right? You have to have girls tennis in the fall, or boys and vice versa, one in the spring, because you can't field both boys and girls on 3 courts, right? That in turn could prevent certain athletes from not participating in certain sports that they might want to as well. So I think we have a real issue with how to manage space. Obviously the fields themselves are a major, since I've moved here and lived here, that who's using what field and when has always been a thing. So I think maybe even also looking at space would be a really good conversation to have, and how we use the space and when we use the space and for what. So those are some things I look forward to putting down the line as well. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Maura, do you have something?
Yes, thanks.
Okay.
I wanted to draw back for a moment, just because I may have heard this number before, or may not have. What percentage of children participate in this student athletics program? So modified JV and varsity generally in a given school year? And is that relatively steady
Percentage of student athletes as
as a proportion of the
as a
total
propor-
population?
so I don't have the actual percentage with me, but it's something I could look into and get back to you on. Typically, we're looking at anywhere around, actually, hold on. I have some numbers here I could share with you.
Even a sort
Well,
of
I can tell
approximate.
you-
We have about 500, within the course of a year, we have about 1,000 kids participating, or 1,100 kids participating a year.
And that's
Some of them are
seventh grade.
And yes, there are repeats to that. because
It's
you-
over 50%, but let's not speculate. Let's come back and get the actual number because, just as we look at, let's say we roughly have 1,000 students on the campus between the two schools, that you look at the numbers that we're estimating, for fall sports, over 400 students participating.
Sure.
And then you think about those that don't participate in the fall, that are going to participate in the winter and then the spring. And of course, there's,
Right.
3 sport athletes out there.
Multi-sport athletes.
So it's going to be numbers certainly north of 50, but it's a number we can get and we can share with you at another time.
I would be interested in understanding, that just as the overall impact of the program as a whole and how students are currently able to access it. So what percentage of students are able to access it now is sort of an interesting way to get your head around it, I guess. The other question was whether or not your the change that you made in coach recruitment, which sounds as if it has been really positive and makes absolute sense. Thank you for bringing this to Irvington. I'd be interested in knowing if this applies only to JV or varsity coaches, or if it was it's enabled us to secure a broader range.
At this point, based off of, the individuals that were already on staff, it pertained more to the JV and the varsity for the now, but it will help in the future as well.
I see.
Because
So-
as time goes on, again, we're all trying to get the exact same coaches. There are certain sports that if I put it up online, within 10 minutes, I'll have like 15, 20 applicants. And then there's sports that I won't receive any applicants like leading into a season, which is very disheartening. And there are many times where, some of our staff members, not just here in this district and other ones, would step up so that those kids would have the opportunity, to participate. But again, we want to try to, secure individuals with the highest level of content knowledge and their ability to work with kids so that they have positive experiences. So currently, no, but in the future, I would guarantee that, yes, it's something that would be helpful for me, again, not to have to wait to like a couple weeks before a season or 3 weeks before a season to try to find someone. If I know that there's going to be openings, after this fall, let's say, I know that someone is going to retire, or, they leave the district or whatever the reason, I know that now I could start reaching out and trying to find and secure coaches in those spots.
So thank you. In other words, it depends, but yes, in a given
Yes.
season. or any
Yes,
given
it
year.
depends. It definitely is dependent on the situation.
And if I remember correctly, and maybe my fellow board members who've been through these discussions can remind me if I'm incorrect, or maybe Dr. Harrison as well. There has been a problem in the past that's really been related to coaching availability at the modified level, where we didn't know how many folks would be moving up in any given year. So we wouldn't know, or would be surprised there was a very large group of kids coming out for a given sport. And the problem would be that there wasn't a coach for that, but there was a coach for something else. So are there any other ways, since you've been here and looked at the modified program outside of sort of changing the window of coach recruitment, that helps to smooth those sort of disconnects out?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question? Because I'm having difficulty hearing you.
I think maybe if I can
course.
clarify, I think Maura's pointing to some, from year to year, sometimes it's hard to predict the participation levels that then would inform, the need for coaches on a particular level. And I would say historically, and John, I'm not going to take words from your mouth, but we do a participation survey that from year to year to try to be able to judge that interest level to inform the planning, and it's something that John's going to continue to do. But I think right now we're seeing shifts in trends in athletics. So you have fewer students that are participating in football globally. So not even speaking about Irvington, yet Irvington, we've seen our numbers stabilize and maybe tick up a little bit because of some stability in our program. But then when we think of everything related to COVID, you're seeing shifts in interest in a lot of lower contact, lower risk sports. So for example, in each of our 3 athletic seasons, we have one no cut sport. So in the fall it's cross country, then in the winter we have winter indoor track, and then in the spring it's track and field. Well, not only do we have like an incredible cross country and track program that's winning awards and competitions year after year, but there's more students that are being drawn to it. I think to avoid some of the contact and that. And so this year, the board will recall that we actually added another coaching stipend because we had numbers like we have never seen before in cross country, which is an awesome thing. But so a part of it is we got great coaches, we have a great program. Another part of it is that I think kids are being drawn to it because it may be a safer option for us today. And I think we're going to see some trends like that, they're going to shift. But then there's changes in popularity of sports, right? Like
There absolutely
lacrosse
is.
took off for a period of time. And now I think some like baseball starting to make a comeback in that. So
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, and thank you for clarifying. I'm sorry I was having difficulty hearing you, but the participation survey that was administered last year towards the tail end of the season is a huge plus in being able to do that. That information is only as good as the follow through on it, because I have done the same thing in my former district, and there are many times I would get very few people to register or say that they were going to register, and then almost to the point where I'm on the verge of folding a program. And my former district was football. We secured a very good coach, and it went from like having 10 kids where I thought I was going to have to merge our program just to maintain and give kids opportunities, to having 30 kids, which we hadn't had since I was there. So I ask, that the public, when those surveys come out, and I know that they receive a lot of information, especially in a climate like this, to please, be active in that participation of those surveys, because that does direct us on where we should be, for that upcoming year. So that is a huge aspect. And as Dr. Harrison said, there are ebb and flows with sports. You do start to see upticks in those, non-cap teams. And in sports like track and field, cross country, everyone participates. There's no, it's not, you might have different levels of athlete, but everyone has equal access to the opportunity of participation in an event. Whereas that's not always the case in other sports. Team-related sports, there's only a finite amount of people that can be on the field at one time. And again, you're trying to have successful outcomes for the individual and the team. So it may kind of stagger, but I would agree with everything Dr. Harrison said in relation to that.
So just one more question, and I will try and shout a little because I tend to have problems with volume. So with when we're looking at capping certain modified sports, and obviously Mr. Friedman has gone through a number of considerations that we want to think about, as has Mr. Graber. Looking at all of the, I know what will often happen, and I don't actually have kids that are yet old enough to participate, so I don't have any lived experience to talk about right now. But it seems when I talk with other families that they always tell me that such and such a sport isn't capped in another district. And they'll always mention another district, but yet when I talk to other board members, there always are. There tend to be, if they are schools of a similar size, or just, even just in Westchester, there are going to be those limitations. They may be different than ours, but there are limitations. Do you, just by virtue of having worked in the area, have a sense of that? We're not reinventing the wheel and having these conversations, I think.
No, not at all. And I think that it varies. It does definitely varies from district to district. And I think even within a district, that philosophy can change. And I think that's why it's important to take a look at our overall philosophy every so often to see where we are as a community and where we need to be. I think definitely, there are schools that, have caps or they create more teams. Again, those have implications on the district, whether it's facility use or budgetary, implications. But it does provide opportunities for kids, and there are various ways in which districts, provide that opportunity as far as, they might have the more competitive team and then less competitive team, or they might merge the program, in a sense that they would kind of mix the higher level athletes with some of the lesser athletes so that they have two successful programs. But again, I think that's something that we need to do what's best for Irvington in relation to that, and what the perspective is here within our community to make a decision that's best for us. And again, you can use surrounding districts and stuff like that as markers, but ultimately it's, we need to do what's in the best interest of our community.
And I would say maybe as a follow-up to that, that one thing things we need to consider, it's not just the ability to recruit coaches, the ability to be able to afford it, to have the facilities on which our students can compete. But we need to have competition as well if we're truly going to develop a program. So right now, I'm going to tell you that I have real concern about the long-range viability of modified athletics in our region. And that's, happening on multiple levels in looking at participation dropping off, club sports growing in a number of sports that's drawing kids away from it because the level of competition is greater. And then also looking at what's happening from a budget perspective in school districts. A lot of districts are scaling back modified sports, talking about scaling back sports. And this year, even before we got into seeing what was going to happen with the section, there were a number of school districts that canceled modified sports, either for the fall season or for the entire year. So there's, so we can have a conversation in isolation, like John is suggesting, that we talk about what we believe in here in Irvington and allow that to guide our policy, so to speak. But at the end of the day, we have to make sure we're creating a structure in which that model will survive, because we can't build something bigger than a space that we would move into.
Yeah, absolutely. If let's say outside of our community, if there are no other programs to compete with, it makes it, there's no competition there unless it was internal. So it's more of an intramural.
So it's not really possible to compete with the clubs. It's like once you get that alternate
You're not
structure
allowed
out
to.
there.
Yeah, that's a restriction. That's a state restriction. We're not allowed to compete against them.
So if we see that happening, what that means is, in a certain sport, what that means is we have to look at that as another factor in its supporting it as a modified.
Let's consider this as we haven't had a chance to talk it. So,
Thank you.
Dave, did you have a quick comment or?
It was just the point of a couple of years ago that it's such a darned if you do, darned if you don't problem, because one year 30 kids tried out for modified basketball. There was only like 2 or 3 7th graders. And then the following year, there was like 22 7th graders and doubled the numbers. And then they played 5-quarter basketball. And 5-quarter basketball isn't basketball. It's another game completely, right? So like the idea of where you sit with this is a difficult thing to come to terms with.
Jane?
Microphone.
When you say no, the caps or the cuts, are you talking about modified or varsity and JV also?
So it was interesting in looking at the survey data that is starting to come in, it was overwhelming that like overall people feel like capping rosters is a positive thing as far as the level of competitiveness. But at the modified level, it really distributed differently. And modified sports are an opportunity, like I said before, an opportunity for kids to maybe have their first experiences, engaging in an activity. But as, Dr. Harrison had mentioned too, when you do start to house and not cap rosters, and I had mentioned also, you might have certain programs that flourish and have too many kids, and then others that really dwindle down and could impact other programs. So again, I think it's a balance, and I think it's a conversation that we definitely should have, a deeper discussion on.
Yes, I know as a parent, it is really heartbreaking when your child doesn't make a modified team. Is there any way of promoting maybe the sports that could house more students, like field hockey, or obviously tennis is a big problem because we only have 3 courts. But if there's some way to promote another sport like field hockey or like track and field, and where more students can participate at a modified level.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that was something that I did in my former district when I realized that those numbers in one sport were so low and the other ones were so high, and it did it. It was still a new opportunity for a kid to be able to have an opportunity to play a sport and be engaged in that climate. It just might not have been their first choice as far as the sport. So I think there are ways that we could promote those programs.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think Beth had a comment, so Beth, go ahead.
I have to unmute. Apologize for that. Yeah, I really appreciate the fact that it appears that you have under your supervision, there has been more creativity that has actually provided more opportunities for sports at a variety of levels, including junior varsity tennis this year, despite the pandemic, where they actually did not cap junior varsity tennis and were able to find ways to provide more playing and developmental time. Before tonight's meeting, about 6 hours before, I know that the board and the administration did get a couple of letters, including one from a junior varsity coach and another from a parent in the community, talking about the fact that, specifically for modified sports, that caps are an issue that has impacts not only on physical health, but on social, emotional health. And that to a certain extent it has to be considered, and this was a quote, an entry into a sport, not a doorway out. So with that being said, I'd like to hear how you feel about that in terms of the age of children who start in modified sports. For example, you could have a 7th grader who wants to do modified sports in the autumn, could be as young as 11 years old. So is there a philosophy that says, well, based on the age of the children who want to engage in modified sports, it is indeed more important to provide more opportunities? I don't know if that is something that is considered in an athletic philosophy.
I think that's something that is definitely something that should be discussed. As we talked about prior, I think it's important to have a more in-depth conversation with various stakeholders, including the individuals that sent those messages, because to me, I understand, personally what people go through when you're excluded, from an activity or on the verge of it, from my own personal experiences. And for me personally, it drove me to work harder and want to become better so that I didn't have, any type of situation like that. But again, every individual is going to handle things differently. And I think if we could get creative, I know our JV coach did a phenomenal job, Kira Smith, in housing 18 tennis players on 3 courts. She got extremely creative in the way that she did it. And it was a wonderful thing to see and kept kids engaged, including student athletes who are displaced, who typically played volleyball. So having, individuals that have that understanding and are able to, develop plans to provide those opportunities is wonderful. And I think, that's something that many of our, if not all of our coaches have been exceptional at doing this year. Every one of them have been extremely creative in the way that they've approached, our sports. And I think that creativity could lead us to a position where, we find ways to include and engage children. Even if it's not interscholastically, maybe it's through intramurals, which our district does provide. And things have been a little bit different this year because of, the inability to use indoors the way that we typically would. But that is always an opportunity for children whose skills might not be at par yet, where they could start to develop them and move forward. And I would always encourage students to, not look at not making a team as a failure, as a motivator to kind of move forward and try to enhance some of their skills through various avenues. And I think, again, that's part of the discussion that needs to be had.
Yeah, I look forward to that. Thank you so much to hearing more about how all stakeholders, not just those who are already involved with modified junior varsity or varsity sports, do speak about the entire school community and the athletic philosophy. So thank you for the creativity and strength you've brought during this difficult time.
Thank you.
Aaron, did you have anything to add? You're on mute.
I have to do this once a day. First of all, thank you, John. This was immensely detailed and gave me a lot of information. And I too don't have a child yet impacted by this, but it definitely makes me think. I did have one question, just as it relates to gender participation in our sports, and how does that play into our policies and our thought processes?
In which way?
Just in terms of participation, and is there a reason to have different policies as it relates to the girls versus the boys? There are fewer girls sports for them to participate in. So does that change the conversation at all from that perspective?
I'm just looking through some of the sport offerings, and typically we're pretty even as far as our participation of boys and girls. There are no policies that would restrict any gender from being able to participate, including participation in sports that are typically established for one or another gender. I'll use football as an example. Female student athletes have access to play football if it's something that they chose to. There's a pathway in which they have to go through, similar to the athletic placement process, to ensure their safety and well-being within a sport and their abilities, but they would have the same access as a male student athlete in sports like that. So, it's.
And John, if I may interject, when I think of, and unless I missed something, when I think of the sports that we offer, where there isn't a matching traditional female or female, when we think of what are typically viewed as a male sport or a female sport, when I think on the male, it's football and wrestling are traditional, but there's that opportunity that John just provided where a female could participate. But we also have volleyball, which is a female sport traditionally. And then we also have field hockey, which is traditionally a female sport. So when you think you line up the numbers of programs next to each other, I think we're relatively consistent. It's the numbers and the head count that you would want to look at to see what levels of participation we may actually have.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, I think this was a really helpful discussion to orient the board around a lot of the competing concerns. I guess, a couple questions and a couple final thoughts. The survey that went out to the community, when's the cutoff for that? And at what point do you think you'll have the responses back, and then also have the time to actually read through them and synthesize the information?
So I'm going to actually reestablish a deadline because I did not receive the participation I had hoped, although I did receive 170 responses. which was a great start. So I'm going to solicit further participation in that so that I have a larger segment of the population's responses. So for those individuals who are currently involved with the athletic programs or will be through this year, I went back and pulled all the parent emails, all our student athlete emails that are still within the Irvington Union Free School District, and all of our coaches, and sent them. So I will go back and resend and ask for further participation so that we just get a larger sample size of where people feel. And that's data I think that we'd be able to crunch and take a look at together as a smaller group when we look at some of these questions that we posed this evening.
I think that'd be great. I think, at least for me, I see the path forward to, collect that community data, try to obviously amplify the response, and then have, a committee maybe composed of some coaches, some board members, and maybe others, so we can, look at our policies and see where we may want to make adjustments, or if we're happy with our current policies, but then also talk about the monetary aspects of it. If there are recommendations about, additional coaching stipends or changing how we allocate resources, that's, where I particularly see the board getting involved, because if it's going to impact the budget, then that's going to be the conversation that, a dollar here is not a dollar elsewhere. So I think, understanding, where we could have some targeted investment that may returns would be certainly an interesting conversation. And, I want to, I think, end where I think it was Moore's question was starting, probably, outside of children being in the classroom, athletics is probably the second biggest impact, in terms of just a percentage basis at, obviously the secondary level. So, I do think this was an important conversation because it's an aspect of students' lives that touches probably more students than anything other than them actually being in the classroom. So I do think this is, an important area to look at, and how we can, better the experience for all of our athletes, both those who are highly competitive and hopefully, have them have a home here, at the JV varsity level, but also, for that seventh grader who wants to try something new or maybe isn't, as developed, but to give them, an opportunity to see where their interests may lie, and also to help, develop, their esteem and, their sense of self. So, I think there's, real continuum of different students who are served by the program. And I think this was an excellent start to the conversation. I think with Dr. Harrison and the executive team, we'll talk about how we can continue this work over the course of the year.
Absolutely.
But thank you. Yeah. And also to, obviously get, the, community involved as well as in the proper way. But I think also, circle back to our strategic partnership council and the Booster Club, which obviously has a big reach into the athletic community, and see, where they can also become involved to help support efforts and so forth.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Thank you very much.
I see you certainly got the Irvington clothing package as you moved, between the tie and the shirt. I think there's like a store somewhere where college basketball coaches go to get like their, team gear, like the moment they get hired. Here's the tie, here's the shirt, here's the sport coat. So you must have found the right store. So
I had to coordinate it myself, actually, but yes, when I received the call and the offer, and was appointed, the first thing I did was, my wife made a lot of fun of me because I traded in a lot of orange for a lot of green, which honestly, green's always been my favorite color. So
then you found the right place. So perfect. So Dr. Harrison, I guess I'll turn it back over to you, because now we'll move on to talking about now our youngest learners. As we're now spending a lot of time talking about, our older students.
Yeah, so thank you, John. And really, I think tonight was a good opportunity for us to get to know you, or the community and board to get to know you a little bit better, and have a window into your expertise and your passion for the sports, and really get to see the value that you bring to our school community. The next conversation that we're going to have tonight is not intended to be a full-on presentation or one that is to really redo what we did a week ago on Wednesday night, where we delved into what is being reviewed for the opportunity at Dow's Lane, where we have the AM/PM model, where cohort A attends in the AM session and cohort B attends in the afternoon session. I'm looking at expanding that to our second and third grade. We facilitated a community information session. We posted the video of that on the website Thursday morning. We also then posted the slideshow for the community to be able to have as a resource. We subsequently administered a survey to parents, and I'll be really honest that I was pushing, trying to get folks to participate. I wanted response from everybody to assess what the impact on our school community was, what the priorities were, and looking at assessing the interest and the capacity of parents to be able to support a change in program, particularly for our second and third graders. And what I think was critical in noting to note here is that it's something that our faculty and staff is quite supportive of. So tonight I asked Andrea, Eliza to join us for a few minutes to give a little bit of an overview of some of the highlights of what we were looking to address in the initiative, and so the board could see a couple of the high-level takeaways. Anyone interested in seeing the full-on presentation can go check out the video that's presented on the website. We're going to crunch the data from the survey this week. We're going to meet with our faculty and staff and then begin to prepare a recommendation within the next week as to how we see ourselves moving forward. But if I may, we're going to take a few minutes, and we said it's going to be tight compared to what was like a half-hour presentation last week. And I'm going to ask Jay if you could please promote Andrea and Liza. And I'm going to kind of pass the baton to Mary, and we're going to talk through a handful of slides just to provide an overview of what it has been proposed. So just give me a minute. And then following that, Carol's going to join us, and we're going to talk reopening finances to get a sense of where we are, where we see the monies that we've been spending as a school community, as a school district during this reopening period. So that said, Ms. Ellis, would you like to steer us and maybe get Andrea and Liza going on highlighting a couple of the key takeaways we want to give the board tonight?
Sure, absolutely. And thank you very much for having us tonight. As Dr. Harrison said, we had a very detailed and extensive conversation with the Dow's Lane parent community about our thoughts. Tonight is really about giving you the highlights of that. We're going to keep it pretty brief. I would encourage people, if you want more detailed information, to go to the district website and watch our presentation. So Chris, if you could take us to the questions that guided our meeting the other night. So back one, please. Thank you. So these were the questions that we had hoped to answer that night. We wanted to go over what our current schedule was and what the changes were that were being considered. And most importantly, why were these changes being considered? How did we feel that our youngest learners were going to benefit? And when Andrea and Liza speak in a few minutes, I think that's going to be an area that they're going to primarily focus on. We then went into quite a bit of detail about what aspect of a child's experience would stay the same and what aspects would change. Tonight, we're probably not going to go into all the little nitty-gritty about numbers of minutes and things like that that we did. But again, we'll give you the big ideas there. And then, of course, very important questions to think about: how much will it cost? And then what were our next steps? And following that meeting, our next steps were to do the survey, which has been completed, and to bring the overview ideas to you. So here we are at our next steps, and I'll hand off to Andrea and Liza.
Hello, Board of Ed and trustees. Thank you for having us tonight. Dr. Harrison, could you advance 4 slides to the why slide? Because I think we're going to focus on the why. Yep, that's the one. Thank you. So as Dr. Harrison and Ms. Ellis stated, we're just going to give you the compact version tonight, just of our highlights. And the why is at the root of everything that we do at Dow's Lane and everything we do as educators. The reason we're bringing this to you now and to the community, our true why is our students. As a staff, Dow's Lane teachers, 2nd and 3rd grade, our K1, our specials teachers, and Liza and I believe that implementing an AM/PM model for all of our children could be a stronger, better model for our learners in this hybrid situation. We believe the AM/PM model offers our students more frequency with their teachers on site. So 4 half days a week on site would give our youngest learners consistency, deeper relationships with their teachers, and just a better structured learning environment for our children. It also lessens the screen time for our youngest children, which is always a concern for all of us. So we are suggesting the AM/PM model for our 2nd and 3rd graders because as a staff and as educators, we believe that this could definitely be a stronger model for our children. I'm going to go to the next slide too. Thank you. A lot stays the same with this proposed model. The children's teachers stay the same, the cohort stays the same, and our Wednesdays stay remote. Our cleaning situation by our marvelous custodians also stays the same. So what will be changing is what Liza's going to talk about, and the condensing of our core academic instruction.
So good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for having me. I feel so honored and proud to be representing Dow's Lane with Andrea tonight. So what would change? The time spent in our core academic learning is going to be increased due to fewer transitions since our specials and Project Lead the Way will be occurring at home, as well as lunch and recess will be occurring when the students are at home. Specials will be reduced from 40 minutes to 30 minutes when students are at home. Students will not be having a 55-minute lunch and recess when they are in school. Instead, our morning cohort will have a to-go lunch when they are leaving for the day, and our afternoon cohort will have a working lunch that will be approximately 10 minutes. What else would change? There's going to be increased traffic in the middle of the day during transitions. We will have more cars since if this model goes through, because our kindergarten and 3rd graders are all following this model. The midday pickup time and drop-off time is going to change to allow for additional time for cleaning of all of the classrooms and for our teachers to have their prep periods. The AM dismissal time will be 10:15 and the PM arrival time will be 12:05. Students may need to share seats on the bus, but efforts will always be made for siblings to sit together, as well as all the students will have their masks on.
Andrea, do you want to please give an overview just of the shifts and what the student day would look like from a contact time and the focus on instruction? And then I think that's a tight summary of where we are, and then we can shift to Carol to talk finances.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so let's go to, can you advance a few slides? Let's go to
the sample schedule.
Sample schedule. Let's go to the sample schedule. Absolutely.
Tell me which slide number, please.
Oh, that's a good one. Let's yes, let's go to this one. So when we think about our K1 model, currently our kindergarten and 1st grade students are in school 110 minutes a day, about 1.8 hours. We're proposing that that instruction would change to 135 minutes a day, or 2.25 hours. So it's an increase in on-site core instruction. What we're suggesting is that our specials and our Project Lead the Way, as Liza was talking about, would be given off-site when the children were not actually on-site at Dow's Lane. So we're talking about an 8 a.m. to 10:15 a.m. session, a break midday for teachers to have lunch and their contractual preps, and then an afternoon session, which would be 12:05 to 2:25. And in those core times, AM and PM, our K through third grade students would receive their on-site core academic instruction.
Great.
That's basic. Oh,
Yeah,
sorry,
so-
Dr.
so
Harrison.
thank you. No, I think it's a good overview. And I think the thing that was, for me, was important to be highlighted here, that because of the necessity to provide teachers with a break and a lunch, so to have a prep period and to have their lunch period, we had to be able to adapt the school day to fit the needs. So to hit a couple different objectives, one, to be able to provide the specials outside of the in-person learning time, so as to maximize the time in school for core instruction, and to be able to still meet the needs for teachers to get a prep and to have their lunch. And we have to remind the community that when students have their special, that's when teachers get their prep period. So if we're going to offer them out when kids are home, our teachers are teaching the other cohort at that time. So we have to provide that prep period during a period when no students would actually be participating in specials learning or experiences at that point in time. So that's why it has to be in the middle of the day. So to accomplish that, we actually have to shorten the days, the in-person time. But despite that, when we sit there and look at the amount of time that's going to be focused on core instruction, it actually goes up despite the shorter periods of time. It's, the calculus is a little complicated, but it does add up to be more time focused on core instructional time. So as we've said along the way, one key component to this was parent feedback. And as I indicated before, we are going through that survey data now. And then, we had to look at logistics. So I just explained some of the details associated with the teacher schedules and our obligations to our teachers, whether through contract or through state labor law. A few minutes ago, Liza talked about logistics of transportation and what needs to happen from a cleaning perspective. But another area of significant focus for us has to be the finances and looking at how we're going to be able to manage this. So one component of this is related to, simply looking at transportation and the cleaning. So Carol, do you want to speak to this? And then we'll transition to the broader finances associated with reopening. So there's context. We're just not looking at the 2-3 scenario without being considerate of all the other expenses the district is incurring.
Certainly, Chris. So with the increased transportation costs, the question might be, well, we're already running the buses in the middle of the day. Why would there be an additional cost? But we would be going an additional half hour of bus time, and there's a cost for that. And it actually would equate to 1 hour of monitor time, because there you can't go in half-hour intervals the way our contract is. So that would equate to approximately $46,500 for the extra time that it would take in between the two cohorts. I could potentially offset that cost if we were to eliminate bus monitors. You might recall that we did actually try to eliminate, or we did actually take out 2 monitors in the budget, which we didn't do because of the COVID situation and our need to want to make sure that children are wearing masks on the buses and such. So we're actually over budget there, but, and I don't really recommend this, but I just wanted to offer that as a cost savings if that were something we needed to consider. There was also an increased cleaning cost. So right now we've been making it work. We have 13 classrooms to clean. We would be doubling that in the middle of the day. Right now we're using all of our ground staff to do that. We're pulling them in the middle of the day. And we're also using a sub cleaner. So when we can get the sub cleaner, it's a little bit, I give a range of cost here because obviously that's a little bit less costly than when I have to use custodial overtime. But honestly, we have had to use custodial overtime quite a bit. We're not always able to get sub cleaners. So that there is a cost there. And, again, when I have to start to go to double the classrooms, I would have to add more people, at least one more person, because I would have the extra half hour to do it. So that is the estimate that I've made.
So when we look at this, and as we transition to some of the more global finances associated with reopening, you can see the challenges that sit with the possible expansion to 2-3. And I just want to be real clear that to expand it to grades 4 and 5 or Main Street School is going to be exponentially more challenging. Not only do we not have the staff to be able to clean the buildings, and you just can't pay people overtime when you don't have people to pay overtime, because you can't bring people in, 3 hours early to start a shift early, because you're just going to have the back end of your day. You're not going to be able to do that necessary work that has to be done. But when you think of the number of buses that we have contracted currently with Royal Coach for the school district, we'd be utilizing all of them at Dow's Lane. So we would actually have to hire another set of 4 buses to be able to transport Main Street School students during the middle of the day, because the transportation times would overlap. So there would be a brand new additional transportation cost, let alone the challenges that we'd have in figuring out how we could even clean. So I just want to be really clear that the mountain to climb to make this happen at Main Street School is huge. And I don't want to be a downer to anybody, but operationally, I just don't see how it could happen. And so when we look at those expenses that Carol had just referenced before, I'm going to ask her now to give a window into all the expenses that we've incurred associated with reopening itself and those really targeted COVID. So Carol?
Sure. So to date, we've spent approximately a little under $125,000 just in personally protective equipment and cleaning supplies. And that includes, masks, gloves, face shields, the polycarbonate we put on teachers' desks and everywhere to separate, keep separation, the extra Clorox sprayers, just the BioProtect, everything that we've done. So we've really spent quite a bit of money here, all worthwhile. I'm not, saying any of it's not worthwhile. We've also invested in technology. We made a quick decision here to, well, not a quick decision, a thoughtful decision to go one-to-one. We've looked at some of the ideas that we had in our budget, and we moved some of the costs for printers and monitors and other replacement items and pushed it toward the Chromebooks. That may have a future cost for us when we have to still get some of those items that are breaking. But, and so I think next year's budget will focus on that again. But that was an additional $54,000. The transportation that we're already incurring for the K-1 runs is a little under $60,000, including the monitors. Again, if we, as I said before, we had originally looked to cut 2 monitors from the buses, but we have not done that. So I added that in as a cost here. We've had some additional custodial staffing. I've had overtime. I've added a sub cleaner in the campus, and also a shift, usually a second 4-hour shift at Dow's, just to keep up with all of the cleaning that we're doing. And finally, one of the larger expenses we've had is that we've had to increase our staff. We've had teachers that are assigned to remote learning, remote teaching, I should say, for various reasons. And we've had to also support the K-1 model with traffic monitors and other support personnel. So that all adds up, and I'm estimating that to be just under $190,000 for the year. These are all annual costs. The PPE, I believe that number could go up a little bit more. We do have a sufficient supply now to take us pretty far, and that included a couple of purchase orders that are outstanding. So I believe we should be in good shape, but it still may go up a little bit. So all in all, that's a little under, $525,000 of unbudgeted expenses. Okay. Now, going to the next slide, when you look at what else are we doing this year that really wasn't in our budget, we really had not budgeted for the NYU contract. Fortunately, the IEF and the PTSA and the IFA have contributed some of the money to that. So now that's only going to be a cost of $22,000 for the district. If we were to adopt, putting down the 2-3 model, the incremental cost for the transportation and the custodial costs. So those would be, approximately $88,000 of more funds I'm looking for. And then we've had requests from technology and from many of our administrators to add additional technology staff to help keep up with the teachers' needs for delivering instruction via technology. So this is another area where we're looking at considering this, and I suppose Chris could talk to that a little bit more, but that's another consideration that we have at the moment. And when you put it all together, I guess the only good news I would say is the next slide. And then I look at, it's a little bit early in the year, but I do this all year long. I look for where we are in the budget. Fortunately, we are showing a favorable transportation balance at the moment. I did budget a little bit more this year in transportation because we were up for bid, and there was a lot of threat with the bus company about how they were going to bid the contract. So fortunately, I am thinking we're going to end with a little bit of a variance there. We have had, on a negative side, we've had quite a bit of unemployment charges assessed to us. And there's some items we're still disputing, but there could be a decent amount of charges that are going to be assessed. And if you recall, the extra funds that unemployment are giving are still borne back by the employer. So, while it's good for those that are unemployed, it's not so good for the employer. We are having a positive variance on special education tuitions right now. We have a few fewer students that are out of district. We had a couple of students move. So that is a positive variance at the moment. Again, that's always a little bit tenuous with the kids move in and out. And we have, when I look at the total health insurance premiums and forecast that out for the year, I see it also a bit of a positive variance there. We did have a few retirees and that had coverage elsewhere, so they didn't take the plan. So between, and then maybe one or two, when I look at the retirees that were existing that have since the amount has been lowered. So those are the variances that I'm seeing at the moment. So that's a little under $500,000 there. So right now I found some of the money that, if you go back 2 slides that I said we've spent, we're still looking for a little bit more of it. And some of these variances other variances may start to play out as we, to look through all of the different salary variances. I haven't really gone through all of them yet. It's still a bit early in the year to see where that's going to land. Sometimes we get a positive variance from leaves. This year, we're also seeing, again, more costs because when someone's out for a quarantine, we have to then cover that person. And so we're paying on both ends on that one. So it's been a challenging year. I don't know that we'll have a ton more great news. It may well turn out that way, but right now I'd say I'm not panicked, but I'm being cautious.
Yeah, I would say the one thing to note here is that it's hard to make projections because we're doing everything differently. So where Carol's referencing, we have $187,000 in monitor fees, but at the same time, we're recognizing we don't have transportation, right, that we're incurring in official costs for modified fall sports because we're doing intramurals. We have to think about regular substitute teachers that we would have, if there would be incurring costs for say professional learning that would be happening during the school year. One, it's not happening because we're prioritizing right now the instructional time over anything else, and there aren't any substitutes out there to even pay. So there's lots of areas where we're kind of reinventing and figuring out things. So the numbers are shifting and moving in many, many different directions.
That was my take. Look at that. I thought there may be some other areas where we're not spending, but also concerned about the revenue side of it in terms of where our sales tax numbers are trending based on projections, whether those are trending higher or lower. And then also obviously the all important state aid piece, since, we still don't have, I think, further clarity on that. And, what is the prudent course given the uncertainty that surrounds that?
Yeah, and I would say, so one little bit of information that we can share that, like state aid, the governor said about how sales tax revenues across the state are way down, but for our region, they're on target. So we're in good shape for our region because people are still spending. So we keep going, knocking on wood there. You're right, Ms. Geddes. But the real question is state aid and what's going to happen with any kind of stimulus funds. Because as we know, when we entered our process, we prepared for cuts. We adjusted our budget accordingly, but what's going to happen with the next steps? And nothing has been communicated from Albany. So I think we're not going to see anything probably until February to get a sense of it.
I will say that we did receive for the BOCES aid due us for last year, we did receive 20% less. And for the excess cost aid that was due us for last year's expenditures, we did receive 20% less. Whether we receive that extra 20% in the future, sometime this year, I don't know. But I ended up not booking it last year. And so that receivable was lower, but it's already, that's cash that I don't have. As far as some of the other revenue categories, we're still looking at them. I'm a little concerned about transportation aid. That is a number they're saying they may not aid all of the transportation expenses we had last year. So we're going to have to try to get an estimate on that. So there, state aid is still, as Dr. Harrison mentioned, is very much up in the air in terms of what we're going to get. But again, our bulk of our revenue is less, less heavily dependent on state aid than some of our other districts, so on the neighboring districts. So we're a little bit in better shape there, but it's always a concern. So yes, I need to work on the revenue aspects of it, and put the whole package together to see where we're at.
Yeah,
But
and Carol, not to add another layer to it, and referencing aid from looking at last year in transportation aid. Right now, there's going to be a battle that's going to ensue in the state with all the professional organizations, from the superintendents, the school boards association, the business officials, because state ed has come out and the state has said that they're not going to provide transportation aid for periods when schools were closed. So we know that there were many school districts that made payment to keep their bus companies afloat in the event that schools reopened. You needed to have buses available and drivers. You couldn't have bus companies go under. You have big districts in our larger communities or in urban areas or rural areas that were using them to deliver learning supplies and meals to kids. And now the state's coming out and saying, for that 3-month window, you can't get aid on monies that you paid.
yeah, some districts even had their own staff, and when they have their own staff, and we were directed to keep all of our employees, and you couldn't furlough anybody, but you kept all the salaries. It's just unconscionable what they're doing right now. So that's an opportunity for advocacy if anyone's out there listening on that one, because we really are going to need support to fight that battle. So anyway, so I do think we're not in a panic state. I do think we need to consider our choices right now for which areas we're going to fund. But I just wanted to give an update on where we are at this point.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Dr. Harrison, was there more, or at this point?
Really, in some, we want to give the board a kind of a nutshell overview. Encourage everyone to really check out the presentation and the session that we recorded from last Wednesday, and then any questions that you may have related to it. But it's a topic I think we've talked through pretty thoroughly. And, but if there's any remaining questions, we'd be glad to answer them.
Yeah, one of the things that I don't think I saw in the slides, and it may be part of the larger presentation, which I wasn't able to attend last week, but the comparison in terms of the amount of learning time in the current model for 2-3 versus a shift to an AM/PM, and how that would impact the amount of learning time, especially in the core instruction areas.
So Dr. Cantor, could you speak to that question? It was the one slide that I kind of threw the curveball in for you to speak to at the end, that difference in the learning time.
Yes.
Chris, if you could put up slide 11, I think that would help us.
That sounds great. Oh, there it is. Okay.
Hang on.
So slide 11 on the top says grade 2 and 3 on-site learning time. There it is.
That's it.
So for 2nd and 3rd grade, our current model is an AA Flex BB model. Our students attend on site either Monday and Tuesday in cohort A, or Thursday, Friday in cohort B. And of course, our cohort C students attend 4 days a week. In our current model for our A and B cohort students, they attend for 235 minutes, 3.9 hours of instructional time, because we have taken out the time that they're in transitions, they're in snack breaks, mask breaks, specials, and Project Lead the Way. What we're proposing is 135 minutes a day, which would be 2 hours and 2.25 hours, which is actually an increase from 7.8 hours a week of on-site core instructional time to 9 hours a week core instructional time. So the actual core instruction time of the teacher with the second and third grade students increases with this proposal on site. It gives students independent work and extended learning to do at home in the AM and PM, and their core instructional time, the relationships, the connections, and the core instruction with the teachers would increase for our second and third graders.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So that's the time that's actually in class with the teacher, but in terms of when you look at then the online component that you would not have in this, is it fair to say that there's probably more guided learning time in the current model than there would be in the switch to an AM/PM?
You know, it's interesting that you use the word guided. When we talk about what a teacher does in the classroom, it used to be called a mini lesson. Now we call it a micro lesson, and they give their explicit direct instruction. And then the children are sent off to explore, to engage in the work, to struggle, to endure their learning, to actually anchor the concepts. So the teacher is not with the child through the whole day. The child is actually independently learning or extending what the teacher has just taught them, trying it out. So it would be the same kind of try it out, do the work at home. It would not be on a screen in a Google Meet, correct?
So Andrea, this was the visual that we used last week to discuss what would happen in that time?
Right. So what we're talking about, when the children are not on site, they would have a scheduled specials time. So art, music, library, PE, and Project Lead the Way would have a specific time, will be live with our specials teachers and our Project Lead the Way teacher in a Google Meet from home. And then the children would also be doing independent practice, independent assignments, extensions, anything to do with our literacy, reading, writing, math, science, and social studies that the teacher had done the explicit instruction in class and the child was doing at home with less screen time. We're trying to also reduce the screen time that our youngest learners are experiencing currently in our model.
And Andrea, just to add on, the benefit of this model is that there is that flexibility in timing for the families and students of when the work is to complete, whether the student is at home in the morning or the afternoon, because they are not expected to be on a Google Meet for the whole day.
That's right.
Dave?
Thank you for your very thoughtful presentation, Ms. Cantor and team. We really appreciate it, Ms. Ellis. I have a couple thoughts / questions. I'll start with, I guess, my first thought is, I guess, you know, this isn't in pertaining to students in particular, but it's pertaining to families. You know, I think it deserves a little bit of conversation here tonight about families that can't necessarily make the adaptation to a change in the middle of a school year, in the middle of a work time, from one model to another model that will change their whole lives. So I think that's worth having a conversation about, even though it's not directly related to student achievement. As it does relate to student achievement, I would love to discuss with my fellow board members and the administration sort of the bigger picture behind what's driving these decisions, which is how our students are either moving forward in their learning or falling behind in their learning, if they are, in fact, and what kind of data we can start to cull now from reading assessments, writing assessments that students are doing to understand what kind of loss we're dealing with, what kind of loss we're not dealing with, because often people talk about that and we have no real substantial data to support some of the things that we talk about. So I would love to see if we could, you know, sort of inch towards a more data-driven analysis of this, especially if you're considering doing it with Main Street School.
So David, if you don't mind, I just want to jump in on that idea of data. Currently, Christine Rosner and Nancy Beck-Deacon are gathering information about our fall benchmarks from the prior 2 years as well as this year for us to determine the degree to which that perception of loss from last spring is accurate or is not. So we should have that data ready in probably a week or so.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much.
So Dave, I think that's going to be an important part. So like we look at how all this is converging and, you know, I'm motivated to try to make a decision as quickly as we can. But, I've stated along the way that I want to see the phrase that I've used, a critical mass of parents to support this. For the reason that you talked about, right? So that idea that, that we need to not only have parents want their kids to have this kind of experience, but we need parents to be able to support it. And when I say support it, not support the school district, but that they can truly support it financially, that they can provide childcare for their kids where needed. They're not going to lose their jobs because of this, because they can't attend to work or can't afford childcare. And we're not going to have kids that could be left home unsupervised. So we have to think about the impact on families. So that survey data is going to play one critical piece of this. And then we know we've had observational data, right? So that anecdotal that's coming back from our teachers, that's really focused on we need this continuity. We need this consistency of instruction from day to day. So we're going to have to look at, there's possibility that you could have the observational data and the survey data juxtapose one another, right? Teachers say, yeah, we need this based upon their observations. And then you could have the survey data say, parents saying hold on, we can't do this. So you could have these two things that are working against each other. What may fit in the middle that may be convincing and may take us longer in this process is to look at that data to see how our kids are doing. And if we think a shift is worth some of those other challenges, and if families are having difficulty, what are we going to do as a community to help those parents so they can get on board maybe to support that initiative? So this process, which in my mind, I thought we could button it all up and then go into Thanksgiving knowing that we had a plan ready to go.
Yeah.
May not be so simple because I don't think that all the data sets are going to come out aligned the same way. So that data that Mary referenced
that'll be great.
Hopefully going to be telling one way or the other.
And the last piece is, sorry.
Can I just jump into that thought there? I think, the fall benchmark data is important, but also, hearing from teachers, in a normal year, they'd be at X point in their lessons and their kids would have a level of mastery of a certain skill, and whether we're seeing the same, typical progression or whether we're not, I think would be also helpful as part of that data, because I think, one is dealing with whether or not there was a loss coming out of last year into this year, but also, now that we're 2+ months into the school year, in a normal year by November 10th, where would teachers be in their lessons, and where would the student development be, and are we on track, off track, and if we're off track, by how much?
Right, where are we? That's a good.
Yeah, we can certainly look at providing that as well.
Thank you, Mary.
The last piece is just sort of, having been the principal of an elementary school and, 8 to 10:15, and I love the work that you guys did and I appreciate it all. I wonder about, again, but 8 o'clock turns into 8:10 real quick, turns into 8:15 real quick before actual, rigorous learning is taking place, removing coats, taking coats on, putting coats back in the cubby. Then, the 10 minutes before the bell rings and we got to get out to the buses, the 15 minutes, I don't know that, I would like to see what the realistic actual time frame is, as it pertains to the movement, in terms of, I only say this because there's competing priorities, right? I am so supportive of moving kids away from a screen, right? I think one of the biggest points from the meeting the other night that I took away was also Tuesday to Monday, the 6-day gap between a youngster seeing their teacher and not, to me, are very large components that are sort of, I'm sure, driving your decision making. They make a lot of sense. But on the flip side of that, right, we're talking about loss of learning and how much pacing that we're dealing with in terms of the curriculum, and losing even more time because of those other things. It's a real sort of scale. It's hard to balance, and so I just wanted to make sure that we consider all the minutes because we're dealing with so few of them. That's all. Thank you.
Maura?
Thank you. Did I miss or misunderstand if it was mentioned, when are kids being pulled out in the proposed plan for reading or writing help if they're getting any sort of extra assistance?
So in the proposed model, we still have our WIN or our win time in the AM and the PM. So our related services and our RTI, which we're calling MTSS, multi-tiered system of supports, would still be happening on-site and off-site, just like we're doing now. Students will be receiving their mandated services and their building level services on and off-site.
So in any given situation, depending on where they were, they would receive the services they need. So it varies by child.
It varies by child and their schedule, correct, exactly, and whatever their needs are. And that's our goal and our focus, absolutely.
Thank you. My other questions are really related to really stepping back a little from this model to look at other districts and how this model is being implemented in other districts. I know that we are in the process of making this decision, but I guess I'm interested in so if we are looking at a regular basis at how these programs are playing out in other districts. I know how overwhelming just moving this process along can be. And once assuming that a decision is made in a period of time this year on this plan, so something will happen or something will not happen. But at what point do we look at our overall plan again for a hybrid model, and where do we start to see broader changes in it? So I know we're going into a difficult period. We're going to a period where it's more likely that we're going to see the schools or even the state shut down. But I'm really, I think it's hard not to be concerned about how this is going to play out. I think a lot of families at the youngest level, at the elementary school level, seem to be concerned about the fact that they don't get Wednesdays. There's no live instruction on Wednesdays. I think that we all are concerned about how the schedule is playing out, and I would certainly give my support to what's going to be best for the kids right now, but I would also like to see a discussion that includes, at the time when it is appropriate, an increase in density in the classrooms and a greater use of time when appropriate.
Yeah, so I would say, thank you, Mark. When we go back and look at where we are and we're constantly evaluating what our system is. We're having conversations about possibly what could become of Wednesdays. That'll be internal conversations. But when we think about density, we have to consider that the density question or limitations are driven by DOH standards. And I think we would all agree that we're not seeing Department of Health relaxing them anytime soon. So I think once we see ourselves starting to move through, hopefully successfully, through the flu season here and hopefully come out the other side in decent shape, that we'll be in a position where we could start to look at increasing that density, so to speak, in the school buildings. So, but by doing so, we'd be looking at a different attendance model than we would have today. But that may include Wednesdays, for example, in looking at the amount of time kids are in school, the number of days. But right now, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, that cohort model is working for us. And the cohort model, whether it's reducing the attendance density on a daily basis or the patterns of attendance in what is currently in place in grades 2 through 12, has actually avoided us having to shut down school on 3 occasions so far, just because the timelines of in-person attendance coupled with periods of contagion. So it's something that we're consistently looking at. But I hate to say it, I think we're potentially months away, and I think the state's going more the direction of closing before we're going the direction of increasing density.
Absolutely. I think that at the same time that we are steeling ourselves in this community and in others for that period of restriction to increase potentially, we all still want to know as clearly as the district understands it from the Department of Health, and really how those restrictions play out for us, and exactly what it could take to relax them, so that we have that to look forward to. And it may simply be that we all want to see a light at the end of the tunnel. But if it makes as you referenced earlier in the meeting, so giving up those opportunities to see family or to be with friends that we are all missing, I'm sure that it's those lights at the end of the tunnel of getting back to normal life that we're all looking for. Thank you for the opportunity to digress a little bit bigger picture. I yield.
Jane?
Yes. My question is about the cleaning between the AM and PM. If, for example, you have 24 desks or in the classroom, couldn't the PM model sit in the desks that were unoccupied and then you wouldn't have to clean?
We've actually removed furniture from classrooms because you need to have safe passageway. And in many classrooms, so some classrooms we have tables, and so it's not just desks. So in some cases where in the elementary classrooms where we have desks, we've actually turned, there's two desks, the one the child's seated in, the other one is turned sideways next to them. That gives the student workspace, but it also encourages. So realistically, the kids are touching the surfaces that are all around them. So no, well, it's a great idea, just not the reality of what it is.
Yeah.
So in our classrooms now, we've removed the furniture to be able to provide the safe passageways to maintain distancing. But,
Okay,
thank you.
give it a shot.
Our remote trustees, Beth or Aaron, either you have any comments?
I actually had a question. I'm just trying to understand, somehow I'm missing this. What are Wednesdays going to look like now in contrast to, not now. How do Wednesdays look differently on either model? Does that question make sense?
Wednesday, in what is today and what Wednesday would be tomorrow if we were to make the transition?
Yeah. I didn't make it clear, but thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, that's the question.
Wednesdays would look the same.
Oh, okay. All right. And the other question is, I'm just wondering, for Ms. Cantor, Ms. Ellis, Ms. Wishney, has there been a discussion of how, if there were the change that's being discussed in second and third grade, whether that would have an impact on the social emotional learning for the kids in terms of, you're removing a certain amount of breaks, specials, recess, you're moving to this different model. I was just wondering if that had been discussed in any way.
So actually, that's at the forefront of our thinking and our work with Castle as a district and a school. And we actually believe that the AM/PM model and having children on site 4 days a week, even though they're half days, would give children a deeper relationship with their peers, in-person learning, and deeper relationships with their teachers. And as we know as educators, everything starts with the relationship. You build that relationship and then the learning comes. So we believe that close contact and on-site work with the teacher as an increased level is more important than anything.
Thank you, Dr. Cantor.
Beth, I also want to say, because, I've received several emails about this as well. And when we talk about students having more time to work on core academics, I think for a lot of people that can bring an image of a more secondary style classroom where kids are sitting in desks by themselves with the teacher talking and them working. And core academic instruction in a primary classroom doesn't look like that. Students are still focused on interacting with each other, interacting with the teacher, having conversations, responding. So I would encourage people who have that concern to remember that a primary classroom is filled with social interaction as part of the learning process.
Okay, thank you very much.
Erin?
Hi, thanks, Ryan. I'll try to be quick as I know it's late. When we talk about the assessment evaluation, will we also break out those students that are fully remote from that assessment analysis so that we can differentiate between those that are in the classroom 2 days a week versus those that are not in the classroom at all, just to see if there's any difference, a significant difference between those two models? And then I guess, I don't know if that's something to be answered now or later.
Sure, no, I can address that.
Okay, sorry, thanks.
I have asked Christine and Nancy to gather information, big picture to start with. And if we see from that there are discrepancies, I think we can certainly start to peel away to see if those discrepancies are greater for certain types of learning situations as opposed to others.
Thank you. Okay, so that's good. Just because we'd hate for the remote only to be a bigger issue and that to sort of get muddled up with the cohort A. My other question is, and this is just taking a step back, is as we think about how the learning is happening now in the cohort A and B model, and especially with the younger kids, is part of the challenge right now that the teacher is having a bit more of a challenge teaching both to in-person learners and remote learners simultaneously? Is that sort of the bigger driver behind the challenge between connecting with the kids who are remote and being able to engage with them, because you also have 10 kids sitting in front of you? It is. So
I would say that has been certainly a massive shift for teachers at all levels.
Right, yep.
To be managing students who are in front of them as well as students who are engaged remotely. Given the nature of how young children interact with the teacher, with each other, their ability to manage the technology, the challenges in that are even greater with the very young.
Okay.
And so it poses a challenge for all teachers, and they're all rising to it. It's a different kind of challenge with the very, very young ones, and one that our teachers and we all feel can be better addressed with more on-site time and without the expectation that the off-site time is engaged on screen with kids in school and the teacher in school.
So then a follow-up to that is just because I know, as you know, Dr. Harrison mentioned, we're polling the community to try to get, you know, more than 51% and have to get into ballot recounting and everything else that might come along with that in today's day and age. So to sort of avoid that like very split community and having to make a decision that plays to 51% versus 49%, even though I think pedagogically we've said that this is the right thing to do, it is upsetting, and part of a student's learning is also impacted by the ability of parents to be able to support them at home, and we don't want to fix one issue, create another issue. So I hear all that, and I think, and so it's a hard decision to make because we're already in the midst of it, right? It's not like we started this out in September. So as I took a step back, I said, well, can we solve, if part of the challenge is that ability of a teacher to sort of pivot between in-person and remote, and to hear a younger child who probably might not be as verbose or, to your point, using the technology as easily, is there another way to solve that problem where we can still increase the education and maybe not change the schedule so that kids that are learning remotely, I don't know, is having an aide or someone else who can be paired more with those remote students? Is that an option? I don't know how expensive that would be, says the finance person. But I'm trying to figure out another way to skin the cat to still get the results that we want and make more people in the community happy, right? Because we want kids to succeed. So that's.
I know that Andrea and Liza would tell you that in our meetings that I have said many times, you know, so if we don't go this route, what are we going to do to make the experience of the children who are at home more impactful. Because yes, we have to look at that. And
Okay.
I also want to say, we're not waiting to find out if there's a decision about, I mean, I can assure you that our teachers are working just tirelessly, and also our instructional coaches, you know, during the day that they were learning together, the amount of time spent in thinking about how can we maximize learning for everyone. They're working on this every single day.
I don't doubt that at all. I'm just trying to think if there's another way we can make everybody happy without changing a schedule and still help and still focus on the kids, right? Because that's what we're all here for. So, okay. So thank you, Mary, for saying that. So then I guess with that being said, and this will sort of piggyback, and I apologize that I'm 5 minutes in now. Sort of also going back to, I guess, what Maura was saying and Dr. Harrison is saying, you know, it's very possible we're going to be fully remote just based on way the number of cases are increasing. And it's not like we have this great pocket of, I think, of cases in Westchester where there's like, you know, 1,000 coming out of one city, or we don't even have 1,000 cases in Westchester, but also sort of knowing that, and we have to think about the remote learning and making sure that if we do have to transition to fully remote in January, let's be optimistic, you know, we're putting a lot of energy into this now. If it meant we wouldn't be making the change anyway until possibly January 1, and then we wind up pivoting, I just worry everyone is working so hard and there's so many things we're trying to solve for, that would our time even be better spent focusing on, instead of changing an entire schedule, focusing on how to supplement it, make it better, sort of, and I'll say sort of knowing that we may have to pivot to fully remote anyway in the winter. That, I mean, I know everyone's already hit a wall and is burning out, and I don't even think our winter breaks, you know, no one's getting away, right? So like there's no vacation, there's lots of staycations, and even that doesn't have the same meaning. So to keep everyone motivated and not, you know, hitting that wall, which everyone has probably already hit, like, I'm just worried about the focus. Like we're all, not that we're all over the place, like we're trying to do what's right for the kids, but how do we sort of stay more focused so that we're really on par with the reality of what may play out, instead of sort of a little bit of a pie in the sky kind of thought of how can we pivot all this, and then we have to pivot back, and then that's another change for kids, right? So we make this change and then and I know they're resilient. God bless those kids. They're more resilient than the parents, which is why we're all, you know, some parents are more challenged by this, right? We're like, my God, please don't make another change. So, you know, that's the reality of it. So, you know, how do we balance all that? So I just want to think about that too, as we think about the survey results and what we're doing and what's best for the kids, and another potential change coming down the pike, like what really is the overall best solution as we look at the next 6 or 8 months. And I mean, I know a vaccine's coming, but who knows where we'll even be in September. You know, there's a lot of thought going into a lot of things right now, and God bless all of you, because I don't know how you're keeping it all straight. Like that's, I don't know if any of that makes sense. So
very eloquently captured the complexity of this. And the juggling that everyone is doing to try to ensure that we're always doing the best for kids. You know, one of the things that we've encouraged teachers in their planning is to plan as if you're going to be remote, and having the kids in the class is a bonus. You know, so
I remember you saying that early on in the summer.
Yeah, so that we're always ready. And, you know, I think our teachers have also gained so much skill. And while they've always been tremendously flexible, any teacher has to be, I think their ability to just kind of roll with whatever comes, it has just, it's exponentially increased. And so while it would be hard to make one change and then another, we're going to do what's best for kids, and our teachers will rise to it, you know, and we'll just keep giving them as much support as we possibly can, and making sure that we recognize how hard they're all working.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Mary.
I'm just going to add two quick.
Yeah, let's
one
try to
is
stay quick so we can.
very quick, because I know we have community members we want to hear from, and I look forward to hearing from them. One is I wanted to note the piece in the afternoon or the morning when the students are asynchronous. You know, I remember back in the spring when we had these conversations when we went first, that the asynchronous part of the learning was the part of the learning that was sort of rejected by the community, or not rejected, but sort of, what's the right word?
Not appreciated?
Not appreciated / criticized. And when I look at the plan and I see sort of some vagaries there, like it'll be extended this, extended that, I just want to remind folks that remote learning doesn't have to be on a computer screen, especially since we're talking about screen time here. I hope that if this is the route that you guys choose to go, after carefully considering all of the input, that afternoon or that morning time when kids are asynchronous is really, really thought about in a particular way that keeps them off a screen but engages them rigorously.
That's a great point and consistent with dialogue that we've had. So.
Perfect. Anything further from anyone? So why don't we move on then to our consent agenda, and while we do that, for the community members who want to ask a question or make a comment, if you go ahead and put your name and address in the Q&A feature in Zoom now, after we finish the consent agenda, we'll be then queued up for the community comment portion of the agenda. So are there any questions on the consent agenda? Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. I know we had some donations from the IEF that we greatly appreciate and thank them for their continued support of all of the district's activities. I know Dr. Harrison spoke earlier about some of the retirements that were listed in the consent agenda, but Dr. Harrison, if there's anything else that you wanted to add.
No, just again, thanks to IEF for donations. Also to note that we're approving a varsity boys swim merger should swim season happen, with RG being the lead team. Before I certainly acknowledge the retirements of two names that are on the agenda now, and Laura Lane, who I neglected to mention at a prior meeting. We thanked Pauline for her service to the district as Pauline is moving on. And also would want to note that Chris Lividini, who's been a teacher aide for many years in the district, is resigned to move on to another phase of his career. So we want to thank Chris and wish him well.
Thank you, Dr. Harrison. And with that, we'll now open up our community comment period. So Jay, if you could promote Jennifer Lippman, 56 Manor Pond Lane, please. And just a reminder, try to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. And you can obviously always follow up with an email to the board at our address, which is board@irvingtonschools.org, with any follow-up.
Hi, can you hear me? This is Jennifer Lippman.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation about the proposed changes at Dow's Lane. I also attended Dr. Cantor's presentation last week. So Dr. Cantor presented really thoughtfully the why behind this and how the administration at Dow's Lane and the teachers truly prefer this. And Dr. Harrison, you seem to suggest that while the teachers and the administration want this and have found that it's pedagogically superior, the purpose of the survey is, I guess, to find out from the parents whether the model is workable for families. And obviously, if certain families cannot make it work with the parents' jobs, or as you mentioned, if certain students would literally be unsupervised at home, then obviously the school needs to know. My confusion stems from the survey and sort of the purpose of the survey. The initial survey that went out at 1 o'clock on Friday basically asked that question that Dr. Harrison had posed, which is that there's a new model being considered, and yes or no, would you be able to send your child to school with that change? But then an hour later, there was a new survey sent out that actually asked parents whether they prefer the current AA Flex BB model or if they want the new model. So I'm just curious to hear how you're going to be able to use the survey data with that latter survey, since some parents may prefer the current model, but they would still be able to make the newer model work. So, I mean, in fact, anecdotally, I actually know many families who, you know, their childcare situation is already arranged and they're sort of already living their life according to the current model. So it's their preference not to shake things up, but they certainly would be able to make the newer model work, even if they prefer the current model. So the revised survey doesn't really address that. So I guess I'm just confused about what you're trying to learn from the survey that was revised, just because they had fairly different premise. And, you know, my own view, which I know is just one parent, is, you know, that while the AM PM does present some logistical inconveniences, I know that personally my third graders teacher really prefers to see the kids more frequently for all the reasons that Dr. Cantor cites. And I just would defer to the teachers and to Dr. Cantor as to what they've concluded as pedagogically and socially, emotionally superior, especially because people like Dr. Cantor have been observing the two models side by side in the same building and have the, you know, anecdotal evidence of which one's working better and why. So sorry if that was a long-winded question.
No, Jennifer, I appreciate the question. It was a really good one. When we sent out the first survey, I wish you could have seen our inboxes, because we received dozens and dozens of emails of parents that were confused by what we were trying to ask. And you are right that it was, the first survey was getting at very clearly the point that I'm raising as a level of concern. But we were trying to be true to what we were saying. So where I think the first survey was authentic, there were parents, many parents that were struggling in how to complete it. And literally quoting comments that either I or some of my colleagues had made, that was where we had stated in the presentation on that Wednesday night, more specifically a preference as opposed to the viability for their family. So I think what we're going to find ourselves looking at is if the actual second survey, if that survey doesn't present that clear-cut decision that I was looking for previously, it may lead to a targeted follow-up survey to those families that maybe didn't support it to measure that level of viability. So I think you raise a really good question, and I approach this really from an authentic place and wanting to provide what's best for kids, but having real concern to make sure that we're not putting anybody in a bad position along the way as a family. So, I think our communication could have been a little more clear in the process, and certainly as the superintendent, I own that. And the second survey was intended just to get some clear-cut information from families, because quite honestly, there were a lot of folks that didn't understand why we were asking the questions that we were. So I think there's possibility for a second question or a second survey that could come up down the road.
Yeah, because I think you could get at that sort of nuanced question of someone who doesn't necessarily prefer it, but would obviously still participate in it, even if it's not their preference.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Sarah Harris Weiss, 53 Hillside Terrace. Jay, if you could promote Ms. Weiss, please.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Great, thanks so much. This has been really helpful, very informative. I think I appreciate everyone for their time. I wanted to say a similar thing to what Jennifer just asked, so I'm glad that she got to it and said it so eloquently, and I appreciate your answer. One other thing I just wanted to add is that with this discussion of what happens when we potentially close schools, I speak having a second grader and also a kindergartner, and I just want you to also be thinking about the screen time that our second and third graders are going to have if they have 6 hours, or 6 hours 4 days a week and 3 or 4 hours on Wednesdays, and how that's going to play out. And at least for me, that's something that would seem to support for me the AM/PM model for second and third grade. So I know that I think Erin brought up that as something that parents might not actually want, this transition to AM/PM if we do go remote, But I think you might find that there are parents who feel like me, that that is something that would be better for our children's health if we do go distant.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Stephanie Fonseca, 25 Eiler Lane. Jay, if you can promote Ms. Fonseca, please.
Good evening. Thank you all so much for your hard work and dedication, as always. As a parent of a first grader, third grader, and fifth grader, I will say that screen time in and of itself is not the biggest issue. In my opinion, the biggest issue is the difficulty in having 10 plus children actively engaged in instruction, while teachers are also actively engaging the children in the classroom. As Sarah alluded to, these 7 and 8-year-olds are spending 6 hours a day being tied to a computer twice a week, plus the 4.5 hours on Wednesdays. So if we go 100% remote, we'll have 7 and 8-year-old children on a Google Meet for at least 28 hours a week. And I recognize that they take breaks, but more often than not, they are still having their headphones in their ear while they eat their snack at their computer, because otherwise they miss when the class restarts. And if any of you have ever had to sit through a virtual all-day conference, you have learned experience of how absolutely exhausting that is, especially when all those hours are spent alone on a computer with limited active participation. At the end of the day, I trust and value what the experts in the field, namely our extraordinary teachers, believe is best for our children. If they believe that the children will be best served by an AM/PM model, then I 100%, or my family 100% supports the AM/PM model. And the last question, actually I have a question. Is the district considering closing the schools after the Thanksgiving break, as they did after Labor Day to start the school?
Well, Stephanie, thank you for your initial comments. With respect to, there's a disconnect with me in understanding the closing after Labor Day, because I'm not sure what you're referencing there, but to speak, thinking specifically about Thanksgiving.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. My last question has absolutely nothing to do with AM/PM model, other than, no, it doesn't. I'm sorry. The question is, when we closed for 2 weeks, in the beginning of the school year, it was my understanding we did that because the teachers or the teachers union believed it was safest, so that we could essentially quarantine for 14 days and quarantine from all the summer vacation returns. And as we all know, there are lots of people who are probably going away for Thanksgiving. So I'm wondering if the district was considering closing for 2 weeks after Thanksgiving. I've heard of other districts doing that. That's why I asked.
That was very clear. So thank you for clarifying, Stephanie. Yeah, so I would say in the beginning of this school year, the benefit was twofold. One, that it certainly provided a buffer from the summer into the school year, but it was an opportunity for us to phase into the model of teachers returning to physically work in school and to begin to utilize the technologies that were going to be available in the classrooms. So I totally get your point now. Right now, I would say that I am not in a position where I am going to recommend to the board that we modify our schedule and go 100% remote for any given period of time following, whether it be Thanksgiving or if it is the December holidays. Reason being is that I feared that, that realistically the challenge here is that we're going to provide greater latitude and flexibility for folks to take longer times off, longer vacations than they would ordinarily. And we're already struggling in a position where we have folks that want to go on vacation now and are saying, well, I want my kid to go remote for a week so we can go to our house here or go visit someone there. And frankly, while I understand the desire and the flexibility of learning being in a remote approach at this point in time, my focus is educating our children now. And I don't want to and I don't want to come across the wrong way, but I don't want to be a travel agent. I don't want to be sitting here and trying to track where people are and where people need to be. Frankly, when we look at what's happening in schools, the least amount of spread that is occurring is in schools right now. Spread is occurring in athletics outside, social experiences outside, religious gatherings outside. So what we need to do is we need to have our children in school, and we need to take advantage of the opportunity for them to have face-to-face contact before we land in a position where we have a statewide closure. So I apologize for coming across emotionally because we're just bending over backwards, working all day long, trying to do the best we can to have our kids in school. And I just fear that we can't give up the time that we have to have children in our company now, especially considering the conversation that we were having before about having kids in more consistently, when I fear that we're only weeks, days away from the prospect of the state shutting us down all on its own. So I ran.
No, I appreciate your answer. I think your emotional response really tells how hard you guys are working to keep the schools open. So I appreciate that. I just wasn't sure if there was a connection because you had mentioned that you wanted to make the change to AM/PM right after Thanksgiving. So I wasn't sure if there was some kind of tie-in.
No, you always ask such smart questions, Stephanie, and I appreciate that. No, honestly, when we were looking at targeting date, we were looking for a natural transition in the year.
Okay,
And,
thank you.
but I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thanks to the members of the community for your comments. Our next meeting is November 24th at 7:30. And if I can have a motion to adjourn our meeting for an executive session to discuss the employment history of particular persons.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Jane.
Second.
Jane seconds. All in favor? Aye.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.